The NHS braces for a surge in demand after 999 calls plummet during ambulance strikes.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Thursday, December the 22nd. This is Breakfast on GB News with Rosie Wright and Andrew Pearce. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
The NHS faces a surge in patients from today after 999 calls dropped by 25% during yesterday's ambulance walkouts. Senior doctors are warning the fall in demand could mean people are suffering at home.
And the Royal College of Nursing will schedule further strike action for January unless the government open pay talks today. It comes as nurses and midwives in Scotland have rejected a 7.5% pay offer.
Against all odds and doom and gloom scenarios, Ukraine didn't fall. Ukraine is alive and kicking.
The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy received a standing ovation as he addressed the United States Congress. That was just in the last few hours. It's his first foreign trip since the start of the war, and he also met for talks with President Biden.
And new analysis has revealed drivers are facing their costliest ever Christmas getaway. Roads are going to see about 20 million car trips over the holiday period. The average price of petrol now is an astonishing £1.53 a litre.
Please get in touch with the programme. We'd love to have your contribution to the show. You can email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us too, @gbnews. So our top story this morning. NHS leaders are warning that hospitals face an extremely tough festive period with a surge in patients expected because of yesterday's ambulance strikes.
Well, 999 calls dropped by 25% during the walkout, with fears among some doctors that fall in demand could mean people are instead suffering at home.
Well, it comes as the deadline for the government to open talks with the Royal College of Nurses approaches. Now, the union, the RCN, says unless discussions start today, they're going to schedule more strikes for January.
And in Scotland yesterday, nurses and midwives, we thought they'd settled, have now rejected a pay offer of 7.5%.
Well, let's get more from this. In the studio with us now is the former Brexit Party MEP, Ben Habib. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
So
morning.
What we've really got now is this escalating blame game, don't we, between the Health Secretary and the unions. Who do you think's responsible?
Well, it's very easy to blame the government, but I hold the government utterly squarely responsible for this issue, particularly for the nurses. You know, this was flagged back in summer. We all knew the Royal College of Nurses was considering strike action when it comes to the autumn. They were given the heads up. They didn't engage. They hid repeatedly behind the independent pay review body, claiming that they couldn't intercede in due process. But here you have, actually, what the government shut the country down 2 years ago to achieve, which is the lack of functioning of the NHS. Remember, we were told, for fear of the NHS not being able to cope, we should all be locked up at home. And here you have the NHS not coping, and it's a completely homemade problem. And again, you've got people at home being untreated. So I think what we've got, very sadly, is a spiral downwards, with the NHS having had 4 million people on waiting lists before the pandemic. Now that's up to 7.5 million people. You've got strike action. That's going to exacerbate the problem. And so if and when they get down to serious negotiations, and if and when this will settle, and no doubt it will settle eventually, you're going to have an even bigger backlog, an even longer waiting list for the NHS. It's a very difficult spiral out of which the government now has to get that public service.
Would you pay them 19.5% more?
No, but I would. I probably wouldn't.
Probably. I mean, 20. That's a 20% rise. That's a huge increase.
Yeah. Okay.
For the taxpayer, 10 or 11 billion pounds benefit.
But let's just understand this first of all. Over the period of time that the Conservatives have been in office, before the current spike in inflation, we had 25% aggregate inflation and wage growth in the public sector of around 5%. We had net real-term reduction of 20% even before the current spike. So they are legitimate. These strikes are legitimate. They have a legitimate gripe, and the 19.5% claim is not unreasonable. Having said all of that, granted, public finances are under pressure. But, and here's the big but, the public sector wage bill is about $230 billion a year. They've already factored in about a 3% wage rise on that. So we're talking, I'm sure the nurses would settle for something around 10%. That's roughly where I think most of these disputes could be settled, including with rail and other services.
Just talking about those other disputes, do you think when it comes to strikes affecting the NHS, the government will treat those differently to, let's say, ones affecting the rails?
They should. Rail workers are on average paid much more than nurses are. And if you look, I haven't finished on my public sector total pay, but, you know, if you look at nurse wages in this country on average versus the US, Canada, Australia, you know, other OECD countries of which, you know, of which we're part, they're roughly half of what they are in those other countries. It's shocking. And that has to be put right. I remember when we were all encouraged to come onto our doorsteps and clap. You know, I looked at wages then and thought, I'm sure these people would prefer proper wages rather than being, you know, clapped in this kind of sort of vacuous virtue signalling appreciation that we're all encouraged to indulge in. So, no, I've got great sympathy with the nurses, and I was just going to say that actually a 10% pay rise across the public sector is affordable.
Well, let's ask you about the ambulance workers, because the Institute for Fiscal Studies, no less, say their pay has not fallen back with inflation. In fact, they've done OK in the last 10 years, for some reason. Their own union bosses are the ones who've put their staff on picket lines. They know that could lead to debts. That will be the responsibility, surely, of the trade unions rather than the government.
Well, it's an incredibly emotive accusation, isn't it, Andrew? And it is an accusation that Steve Barclay and others are using, that you are going to be responsible for death. But in making that accusation, what I think the government is seeking to do, and I think, you know, in a sense you've just done, is to rob them of the right for legitimate protest.
Well,
how else?
There is talk that there will be a new law next year banning strikes in the 9/9 emergency services. Would you support that? Police can't go on strike. The army can't go on strike.
Yeah, and perhaps there's an argument for that. You know, I would need to look at what the law says and how it's enacted and so on before, you know, making comment. But the fact is they have a right to strike at the moment. That strike has been called legitimately. There has been public sector wage constraint for the last 12 years. And there is a social injustice here too. You know, with ultra-low interest rates and QE and all the rest of it, the rich have done really well over the last 12 years, and it's the working and middle classes that have suffered. So there is that imbalance, inherent social imbalance that needs to be put right. You're going to start thinking, I'm sort of from the left wing. I'm not. I'm from a libertarian, deregulated, low-tax, sort of right-of-centre viewpoint. But as far as the public sector services are concerned, they have been underpaid for a long time. And the only way to really get people on their front foot working for you, whether you're in the private sector or public sector, is to pay them properly.
Who holds the strongest hand right now?
The nurses do. I think the public sympathy is with the nurses. And that may not be the case with the rail services at the moment, but certainly as far as the NHS is concerned, they still have the public sympathy.
And the question is, when will there be some resolution to all of this? More on that later. Ben, thank you very much for joining us in the studio. Ben Habib there. Right now it is 8 minutes past 6. Let's move on to news overnight.
Yeah, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has held talks with Joe Biden in the pair's first in-person meeting at the White House. Remarkable.
After the pair announced more support for Ukraine, including a missile defence system, Zelenskyy addressed the US Congress, promising to return the support that the United States has given to him and his people.
Thank you for both financial packages you have already provided us with and the ones you may be willing to decide on. Your money is not charity. It's an investment in the global security and democracy that we handle in the most responsible way.
Joining us now is the former advisor to President George Bush on public diplomacy for Europe, Eurasia, Professor Colleen Graffy. Thank you very much for joining us. What a passionate, incredibly emotive speech from Zelenskyy. What did you take from it?
It was indeed inspiring. It was really a spectacular speech, and it took Washington, D.C. by storm. You will have seen all of the standing ovations that he received, really from all members of Congress. It was clearly bipartisan support for him. And for anyone that watched the speech and those that will read it, he really made an impassioned plea to the American people, well, first to thank them profusely, but also to help them to understand that the money that is being given by the United States and allies is, as he said, not charity, but it's supporting goals for justice and peace and international security that they are fighting with their lives for. So it was really inspiring, and it helped to kind of focus the lens on what's going on here, from seeing Zelenskyy the day before on the front lines in Ukraine in Bakhmut, and then flying the next day to the United States to appear before Congress speaking in English, which was clearly not easy for him, but he did a brilliant job at it. And then we juxtapose that with President Putin, who has really not left the Kremlin except perhaps to go to Belarus, and is not there at the front lines to see his troops, and is not there giving the sort of moral support that Zelenskyy has been giving. So it was quite a comparison between someone who is a global leader on the world stage and someone who is really diminished and showing weakness, and that is, of course, Putin. And I think support for him is clearly waning in Russia.
Professor Graff, it was a stunning PR triumph for President Zelenskyy. How important is it, in your view, that visit now cements firmly in the public's mind in America continued financial support for Ukraine? Because there's always a risk, isn't there, that you get fatigued, people get bored, they get fed up. Oh, we don't care about that war anymore.
You're exactly right. And that is what Putin is counting on. He can't win militarily. He can't win with the morale and the purpose of what they're doing. He can only win if our resolve weakens. And if when we get distracted and we get bored and we're not quite understanding what's going on, that is what Putin is hoping for, that winter will take fold. We've got Christmas, holidays, and people will forget about it. So it was incredibly clever for Zelenskyy to come over now, just as we're transitioning to a Republican House, and to really bolster bipartisan support and to make this impassioned plea to remind the American people and the world not to forget.
Biden was very clear to say, we're not forgetting, we really do support you. How important is that continued endorsement for then other countries, let's say us, ourselves, the UK, to them step up and say, OK, we'll follow suit?
Well, the UK has been remarkable. I think everyone recognizes the UK has really been outstanding. So to continue that support, especially with all that the UK is going through at this time, it is meaningful and it is powerful. And clearly the Prime Minister has indicated that he's supportive. There's monetary concerns, but I do think that this visit to the United States and the remarkable performance this evening will encourage the UK, the EU, all of the NATO countries to stand continuously with Ukraine until they are, as he said, victorious.
Exactly. It was the meeting between the two presidents, Professor Graffy, was 81 years to the day of Winston Churchill going to the White House to speak to Franklin D. Roosevelt. And we know the result of that was that unbreakable bond which helped win the Second World War. Biden is a keen, I think FDR, Roosevelt, is his political hero. He'll have been very conscious of that date, won't he?
Absolutely. And you're exactly right. FDR is his hero. That presence of Churchill at that important point in American history. Also, Nancy Pelosi, the current Speaker of the House, also mentioned the significance of the date of when Churchill had also come to make a direct appeal to the American people. So very symbolic in everything that happened, and also, Zelenskyy wearing his wartime outfit was reminding us that he's not in a suit and tie because he is actually at war, from the front lines yesterday to the front lines of Congress today. And he has to, that's his number one purpose now, is to keep this in the forefront of our minds, that we need to be supporting him, not for Ukraine, but for the West, for international law, for the purpose of the United Nations Charter and respect for sovereignty. And that in this day and age, you just don't invade another country.
Professor Graffy, thank you very much for your insight and analysis this morning. Much appreciated. At 6:15 now. It was deeply moving to him speaking English like that. And it's not a surprise that everyone got to their feet because it was so rousing. I could hear one of the producers playing it some earlier and I thought, oh, my goodness.
He's the rock star of politics, isn't he? He's the man of the year. He's a political hero. And Colin Graffy was quite right to contrast it with Putin cowering Putin, cowering in the Kremlin, giving out medals and only the day before we saw Zelenskyy on the front line in the Ukraine war. But what I thought was also extraordinary, the great cloak and dagger operation to get him there, the secrecy involved, the planes that were involved, planes flying from US air bases in Britain. And then, of course, when he got there, he delivered. He's a brilliant, charismatic speaker, and we shouldn't forget he used to be an actor.
And part of that is curating a PR campaign, isn't it?
It's a brilliant PR operation. And look at him in his military fatigues there. And a great boost for Joe Biden, actually. A few weeks ago, we were writing off as an old duffer who was past his sell-by date.
Who are you saying when you say we? I think you mean you, Andrew.
Yes, I was writing him off as an duffer. But he turned it round in the midterm elections, and an extraordinary PR triumph for Zelenskyy in Ukraine. And I hope that we continue to support them.
We'll have more on that later on the programme. But right now, it's 16 minutes past 6. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of the day's top stories. And national highway workers in London and the south-east of England begin industrial action today. Strike's going to continue until Christmas Day. The Public and Commercial Services Union has acknowledged that the walkouts are likely to inconvenience travellers, but blames the government for offering a below-inflation pay offer.
Strikes everywhere. Now, the Cabinet Office Minister Oliver Dowden has agreed that Matt Hancock, the former Health Secretary, broke government rules by appearing on reality TV shows without first getting permission from Parliament's anti-corruption watchdog. It comes after the Advisory Committee on Business Appointments criticised Hancock for signing up for I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, and SAS Who Dares Wins. A spokesperson for Mr Hancock says he followed the rules and said the watchdog got itself in a total muddle. I think he did.
England forward Beth Mead has been voted the BBC Sports Personality of the Year. The 27-year-old scored 6 goals and provided 5 assists during England's successful Euro 2022 campaign. She beat a host of sporting stars, including the England Test cricket captain Ben Stokes and the 7-time world snooker champion Ronnie O'Sullivan to get top of the poll. Are you going to be watching any Christmas films over Christmas?
Yeah, always I do. Yeah, I'm not sure. I love some of the old corny Christmas ones, but I probably watch Sound of Music.
Yeah.
Great family
really?
favourite.
Oh,
I
wow.
love that. If either of the Mamma Mia films are on, I'm a bit of a Mamma Mia fanatic.
Good.
I've seen the stage show 30 times.
30
times. I have.
That is too many times.
I know. Well, it has been running for 20.
That's boring.
No, it's been running for 23 years.
There's so many other things you could see instead.
Yeah, but I go to see lots of other things at the theatre.
I mean, oh yes, and there's the ABBA. I can't remember what it's called now.
The Avatar.
holographic one. I'm
I've
going
been to that.
in January.
Oh,
yes.
you'll love it.
And you told me it was brilliant.
It was, and it's within minutes you forget their avatars. You think you're at an ABBA concert. So that was a great tick for me.
Did you see it 30 times?
No, I've only seen that once. But
now, the reason I bring up Christmas films is that many of us might have an afternoon or an evening in front of the sofa. If you're watching on Netflix, you've got to get your accounts in order because news out, sharing your Netflix password may very well be illegal. Now, I'm not saying that. It's the Intellectual Property Office. You may not have heard of them. The IPO. It's a government body. It's breaking copyright law.
Yeah, extraordinary. But how would they ever enforce it? What if they do catch you? Because I think I'm probably breaking the law. Am I allowed to admit that?
Sharer?
No,
it's
actually,
up to you if you can admit it or not.
Actually, I'm not. I am in the clear, but I think I know at least one person who's sharing my password. So that's.
So who's to blame then? Did you must have given them the password,
I gave them the password, yeah.
Oh, gosh, are you going to change it or not?
No, but, I mean, the Intellectual Property Office should find other more important things to do, frankly.
Well, apparently they put this statement on their website.
Yeah.
They then hastily deleted it, according
right.
to the Times, but they stood by the advice. So that might make for a couple of awkward conversations around Christmas.
I know.
If someone's been sharing your password...
Has anybody been sharing yours?
Actually, no. Andrew, I'm such a goody two-shoes. And I'm not good on absolutely everything. But also, I've
Were you head girl at school?
Oh, my gosh, I was deputy head girl.
There we are, you see.
Deputy.
I was sacked as a prefect, first time in the history of my junior school, after only 2 weeks. Brought shame on the family. Yeah, I was a naughty boy.
you know, one of my best friends was the head girl. That was quite a painful friendship for a short period of time. I sound such a loser, I have to say, but do stay with us across the programme. What do you reckon? Netflix, is that a little bit mean, copyright law? Maybe you'll be locking someone out of your account. Lots to come on the programme here, though. 20 minutes past 6. Get in touch with your views on anything. Strikes, passwords, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll bring you the latest on the travel situation as people prepare to make their journeys home. But first, the weather.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin and this is your latest weather forecast from the Met Office. Bit of a foggy start in places, staying fairly damp, misty and murky across the south today, whereas further north we should see some brighter skies. Low pressure is moving away from the north, hence why it'll be drier than yesterday, but further south we've got a whole host of weather fronts just gradually edging in, bringing outbreaks of rain and drizzle across a good part of England and Wales. Eastern areas starting dry, but it is, as I say, quite misty and murky, some fog around, especially on some higher routes. Brighter skies for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but northerly winds setting in, bringing more showers across the far north of Scotland, falling as snow at times across the Northern Isles. No chance of that further south. It'll be rain and drizzle because it is really mild here, 11, 12 degrees Celsius, but it is turning colder again across northern Britain with those winds starting to pick up once more, though generally the winds, certainly for northern England, Northern Ireland, are a lot lighter than yesterday. During this evening, I think we're not going to see a great deal of change. Those northerly winds still bringing some showers in across northern Scotland. It might turn a bit icy as temperatures fall away, but further south it stays murky, misty again, some fog in places and rain returning to the far southwest by the end of the night. Very mild here. Temperatures may stay in double figures, but colder conditions setting in further north. And that north-south split continues into Friday morning. This band of rain could be pretty heavy. A lot of people hitting the roads on Friday, so just bear that in mind. It's going to generate a lot of spray and surface water spreading from south to north, getting into northern England and Northern Ireland, southern Scotland by the end of the day. Further south, it should brighten up during Friday afternoon. Still pretty mild here as well, although it will at times be windy. And again, I've got that big contrast between north and south. Low single figures across the north, much milder conditions further south. The milder air wins out through the Christmas period for all areas, mostly looking fairly grey for Christmas, but then it could well turn colder and brighter during Christmas Day from the northwest.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the programme. 25 minutes past 6. Still to come at 6:45. This year has been called the year of the so-called side hustle. Workers are increasingly being turned to taking up another source of income to beat the winter cost of living crisis. We're going to be speaking to a freelance magazine editor who also runs an online marketplace for buying and selling wigs.
And at 7:45, we're going to get tips on going green and having a sustainable Christmas this year, from composting leftovers to environmentally friendly wrapping paper. That'll be brown paper.
Could be. I think it's particularly paper that doesn't have shiny bits on because you can't recycle that. We'll find out from the expert in about an hour. But get in touch in all the usual ways, particularly what is the solution to this strike action? GBviews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us too at gbnews.
Well, the Great Christmas Getaway is underway. 20 million car journeys are expected over this festive period. But, of course, it's going to be pretty expensive because of rising fuel prices, which means filling your tank up this Christmas could cost you £100.
If you're considering getting the train home instead, or you're going to be catching a plane, you'll be facing the ever-present strike action.
Our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody's been investigating exactly what it means for those making journeys home in the coming days.
Before we tuck into this, we've got this. When it comes to travelling home for Christmas, we're on the road to nowhere. Planes, trains and automobiles grounded, cancelled, snarled up. Travel broadcaster Simon Calder says he's never seen anything like it.
I've been covering disruption at Christmas for longer than I can remember, but frankly, I've never quite seen it as confused and stressful as this.
The RAC is saying there will be 20 million car journeys between now and Christmas, nearly half of those on the 23rd and the 24th. For many, it's a case of jam today, jam tomorrow. And it's pricey too. Petrol is around 153 pence a litre, with diesel at 176, significantly higher than last year. The RAC says we're being heartlessly overcharged. Better to get the train instead? You'll be lucky.
If you're on the roads or the railways, the advice is travel as early as you possibly can. Things will be getting very busy on Friday on the roads as well as Christmas Eve. And frankly, if you don't get where you need to be by Friday night on the trains, well, it could be too late. Some lines have no trains at all on Christmas Eve, and on others they will be shutting down very early indeed.
That's because of another strike by the RMT, this time from 6 p.m. on Christmas Eve. And it's not much better in the skies either.
In the skies, well, it's too early to tell what the effect will be of the UK Border Force strike, which is going to affect passport control at Heathrow, Gatwick, Manchester, Cardiff, Birmingham and Glasgow from Friday morning onwards. The airlines, the airports and the authorities seem pretty confident it won't have too much of an effect.
The experts are pumping out the usual public announcements. Check your car before you travel, leave plenty of time, wrap up warm, and expect the unexpected. When we finally get home to loved ones, enjoy the festive break, they say, because there's more strikes and travel chaos in the new year. Jeff Moody, GB News.
It's also bar humbug, isn't it? Well, for more on what fuel prices mean for the average driver, we're joined by the founder of the Fair Fuel UK campaign, Howard Cox. Howard, good morning to you.
Good morning, Andrew. Good morning, Rosie.
Now, the Daily Mail, my newspaper today, front page, quite clear, analysis by the RAC says petrol should be at least 15p a litre cheaper. Who's ripping us off?
Good question. I've been saying this for the last 4 or 5 years now, that we've been ripped off in the fuel supply chain, and there's definitely opportunistic profiteering going on, but it's further up the fuel supply chain. It's not the independent retailers, because most of them are actually tied to very, very strict contracts with their wholesalers. So it's the wholesalers and the oil refineries and the big oil companies that are, I'm afraid, basically fleecing every driver to the tune of 15 to 20 pence is our estimate.
The big four supermarkets, they actually dominate fuel retailing now, Howard, don't they? They're not exactly doing much to lower their forecourt prices. They're missing a trick here, aren't they?
Yes, they are. About 50% of fuel dispense comes through supermarkets. And for some reason, and I think it must be because the fact is they're not making so much profit on their other core business, i.e. food and what they sell in the supermarkets. Previously, we used to see Asda, Morrison's, Tesco's give you something like 10p off per litre if you put 50 quid's worth of shopping through their outlets. But that sort of a deal seems to have disappeared. And you're seeing that independent retailers are actually cheaper than supermarkets at the moment. And it's even worse because supermarkets buy direct from the refinery. They don't buy through the wholesaler and that sort of thing. So they're making huge profits on drivers. And that 15 to 20p equates to something like £7 to £10 per driver. Every time a driver comes into a forecourt, the retailer is wringing his hands in delight that, here's another £10 worth of profit.
What's it going to take for prices to come down, and can you see that happening any time in the near future?
Well, I'd obviously say please sign up to fairfueluk.com. The important thing is that we're fighting on three fronts. The two biggest fronts is one is we're still the highest tax drivers in the world, and why we're seeing it Rishi this week at the liaison committee actually not denying that the OBRs, in fact, in the autumn statement, this is the first one in 13 years I've been campaigning in, there was no mention of fuel duty. But 2 hours later, the OBR came out and said there'd be a 23% increase in the March budget, which equates to around about 14.5 pence. That's 12p plus VAT. And don't forget, the government are wallowing in a shed load of VAT because of these higher prices. What we're seeing is that what we're calling for is a body called Pump Watch. And Pump Watch is which I've got masses of support. And tomorrow there'll be a letter going to with about 25 MPs signing to the Jeremy Hunt, asking for a consumer price regulatory body put in place to actually get some transparency and fairness at the pumps. And the other thing, of course, we're calling on the Chancellor and Rishi to come clean and say there's no increase in fuel duty in March, because at the moment they're just playing these will he or won't he games, and they seem to be enjoying this upsetting drivers, and for businesses could need to plan for the next 3 to 4 months.
Just remind us, Howard, finally, how much duty is the government taking? How big is the tax on our fuel?
What we're saying is it is 52.95p per litre plus the VAT on top of that, and that's really great with people, Andrew. You've got the VAT on top of the tax, a tax on a tax. That to me, that's immoral. So what we're seeing is something like 50% everything goes into the tank goes to the government.
Extraordinary, isn't it? Extraordinary figure.
Howard, thank you so much for talking to us. Really appreciate it this morning. And if you are planning your getaway and filling up, then I'm afraid that has not been very positive news. Can I just say hello and good morning to David O'Callaghan. Very good morning. He says, I'm forgetting about the strikes.
Good.
And the cost of living crisis for the next week because my grandchildren are on their way from London to stay for Christmas. They're Harley, age 8, and Daisy, age 4.
How nice.
So I think from the last 5 minutes, the advice would be travel soon and get there as fast as you can.
Yeah.
And if you're going to go on the roads, today is definitely going to be better than tomorrow.
Absolutely. And if you're a petrol retailer, come on, guys, give us a break. I don't have a car, but, I mean, it's just becoming... It's exorbitant now, isn't it?
It's unavoidable. Front page of the Mail.
Tax. Over 50% in tax. We're already the most taxed we've ever been in this country for 70 years. And I bet we're not taking into account the fuel duty either when we look at those calculations.
More on that to come, and your Christmas getaways on the rest of the programme. After the break, though, don't go anywhere. We're going to be going through the papers with Freddie Gray and Scarlett Maguire. That's next.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel. Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. 6:35. You're with Breakfast on GB News. Andrew and Rosie this morning keeping you up to date. Let's start with the papers and go through the front pages.
So the Express leads on fears the sick are suffering from home after those emergency calls plummeted during that ambulance strike yesterday.
The Times says the health service faces an extremely tough festive period as demand rebounds after the paramedic strikes yesterday.
And it's the NHS for the Telegraph too, focusing on the fact staff may be offered a fast-track pay deal. This is from the Health Secretary Steve Barclay to end the strikes next year. It also covers the hero's welcome, oh my, received by Ukrainian President Zelenskyy on that fantastic trip to the White House.
The Daily Mail. We were just talking about this, leading on what could be the costliest Christmas getaway on the roads on record, with diesel almost £15 more expensive than this time last year.
And finally, the Daily Star asks, where's Rishi? They claim he's missing in action while the whole country goes on strike and the NHS crumbles.
Right, well, let's delve inside the papers. Joining us this morning to do that is Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and also former Labour advisor, Scarlett Maguire. Very good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
It is unavoidable for us to not start with talking about the strikes, nurses' strikes, paramedic strikes yesterday. Freddie, let's start with the front page of The Guardian, shall we?
Yes, well, surge is the word. NHS braced for surge. A couple of papers have gone with this word surge because, obviously, there was with the strikes yesterday, there was a 25% fall in 999 calls, which is going to produce a backlog. And we've seen this from the pandemic, that when you get backlogs in the NHS, everything gets clogged up. It's going to be a very, very bleak winter. And it feels like every Thursday morning I come in and do the papers, we're talking about some public sector, intractable public sector problem.
Is there not a possibility, Freddie, that the fall in numbers of 999 calls is not because people are putting off treatment, they just actually, too many people have been calling
the cynic
emergency service
in me, and I think we might be onto something.
Yeah.
If it's an emergency call, then you've got to make it.
Yeah.
You can't just not make it because you know there's a strike on.
But the number of calls to 111 and GPs increased.
Yeah.
So perhaps some realism's going to creep in.
Well, possibly, and I mean that would be a great help to the NHS if there wasn't an overload in A&E visits and 999 calls. But, I mean, at the same time, there's going to be this overlag, and the experts are worried about it.
What do you make of the fall, Scarlett?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that it's people putting it off. But, I mean, I was amazed that people even noticed the difference with the ambulance drivers. I mean, your paper, the Daily Mail, had this story on Monday or Tuesday about this old woman who was stuck for hours and hours and hours.
25 hours.
And said, you know, what's going to happen when the ambulance strike? You thought, you don't need an ambulance strike. This was a woman who said, I mean, a friend of mine was told multiple sclerosis, you know, fell out of bed, broke some bones, and 999 said, we're not dealing with it, ring 111.
Yeah,
I mean, it just, honestly, I mean, it's not about there's going to be a surge afterwards. It's what's going on at the moment, which is just absolutely shocking.
Freddie, isn't the problem here again... The bed blockers in hospitals. So the ambulances turn up with an emergency case. They can't discharge the person in the back of the ambulance because there are too many people in beds that shouldn't be in beds, older people particularly, because there's not enough spaces in care homes because there's still no social care package from the government.
Well, yeah, it's intractable, isn't it?
Yeah.
At every stage there's clogging up. Yeah. There's a problem. The NHS isn't working very well. I think that's clear.
But what's so terrible about that is we have a Chancellor who used to be Health Secretary, then was Chair of the Health Select Committee, brought out a really good paper on how to deal with social care, because that's where the blocking is. I mean, if we could unblock social care. And, you know, he said, quite rightly, you need to raise wages because there are 100,000 people missing. You know, what has happened in the meantime? Absolutely nothing. And actually, if we could sort out social care, half of the NHS's problems would be over because you could get people in beds.
Well, should we look to the Telegraph? Because an analysis there saying NHS to be offered new pay deal to try to end the strikes. Do you think it'll be successful?
Well, this is a very convoluted story. So what they're saying is we're going to offer them a pay deal for next year, jam tomorrow, to make up for not doing it this year. I mean, what is the pay deal for this year, for next year, that is going to get them? So they're going to say, we'll fast track this, we'll do a pay deal, and instead of waiting 9 months for it to come in, we'll do it early. But they still have to say, what are the figures? What's going to happen? And if it's not backdated, I don't see... I mean, what the government doesn't seem to understand is the amazing support that there is in the country.
I was going to ask you about that. As a former political advisor, you've advised many prominent politicians. Does it strike you as bizarre that a Conservative government is picking a fight with the nurses?
Completely bizarre. I mean, it seems to me completely mad. And I mean, I do remember during the lead up to the Iraq thing, and I said to my Labour people, I said, those people out there, they're our people and we're losing them. And this is, you know, you don't take on the nurses when we know they do a really good job and we rely on them.
The government have taken on the nurses. One YouGov poll suggested is about 2/3 of the public do support them. How's this going to play out?
It's not playing out very well, is it, for the government? I think Rishi Sunak is trying to sort of channel Thatcher, apparently. And it's not working. I think the government know that they are losing the political fight here. They're losing the public fight. But what they also know, which is a very difficult point to make in public, is that keeping public sector pay down at the moment is one of the only things that will stop the inflationary cycle that we're in. It is.
It's not.
It is.
Public sector pay doesn't affect inflation. Right?
Well, I mean, you can flatly say that, but I'm not sure it's true.
Well, I say it because that's what the economists say, because the point about public sector pay is it doesn't add to the price of things, right?
It does.
No,
because
it doesn't.
If a large section of the population have more money, they spend more money. And if we're in an inflationary cycle, that can add to inflation. This is what the government is worried about. I don't think they're wrong to be worried about it. What's odd is that they can't say that publicly. They have to...
There's also another thought, isn't there? If they did meet this huge bill, they'd have to borrow more money, Scarlett, and the interest rates are climbing, and we're already paying huge amounts of billions every year to service the national debt. And that would go up even more.
But there is a real problem about the long term. I mean, you know, they talked about surges and things. Is one of the problems in Britain at the moment is long-term sick, right? Is all the people who are not working but are on disability benefit because they're on long-term sick. I mean, we are literally a sick nation. I mean, I don't know if I'm certainly old enough to remember the 1970s.
I can remember them too. I can.
And it is. We are a sick nation. I mean, literally at the moment. And you know, I mean, you know, Kelvin Mackenzie of The Sun was on saying, well, you know, if nurses don't like it, they can leave. That's the problem.
They already are.
They are leaving.
The other way you bring down inflation, by the way, is mass unemployment. So that's the other option we're facing. There's going to be a lot of pain before we get inflation under control. And a lot of people think that we're due a deflationary spike, but it's not happening. And I do think it's a really serious problem. And I think it's stupid.
So, Freddie, with your supporting a deputy head of the Spectator, which supports the Conservative Party. Do you think it's political?
Any party.
Well, I don't think they're going to. They weren't very nice about Jeremy Corbyn. Yeah, well, quite right too. As have I. Particularly the Conservatives have been hopeless for months, in my view.
Yes.
But would you politically suggest that they get this settled a bit quick?
I think
with the nurses.
I think they've probably got to do the nurses because. But again, I mean, I think they are being. I think what's the problem for them is being pitched that they are picking a fight with the public sector all at once. What's actually happening is the public sector is picking a fight with them all at once. And when you've got such broad hostility to you in the country, you're in a sort of impossible problem. I mean, I don't think they're going to win the next election, put it that way.
No.
Shall we move on from strikes if we can? Very briefly, let's look to some international news. And Freddie, we've seen this extraordinary meeting of Zelenskyy and Putin overnight. Zelenskyy got a standing ovation. And the Express have got some analysis. A hero's welcome, they say.
Yes, well, I was talking about this, and forgive the cynic in me, I think Zelenskyy should wear a suit when he goes to Congress.
Oh, no.
Okay, why?
Yeah. Because, I mean, he's not at war there. I understand the sort of the PR element of it, but he's not fighting a war when he's visiting the White House. So I don't understand why he doesn't wear a suit. Very minor point, I agree.
And
obviously,
it's the wrong point.
Obviously,
it's the wrong point.
The important thing is that they are agreeing to spend lots more money on weapons. Quite what the end game is in Ukraine is still unclear to me. But it was nice that Biden said he looked into Zelenskyy's eyes and saw he had a soul, because he famously said of Putin, or he claims that he told Putin, I looked in his eyes and I said, I don't think you have a soul, sir.
Yeah.
And so, if you believe that, you'll believe anything. But anyway, it's good news for Ukraine because obviously Russia's attack was an awful invasion, and they shouldn't have done it.
And it is about Ukraine fatigue, isn't it, Scarlett? That's what he's doing. I mean, I suspect he'll be in Britain at some point because people think cost of living crisis, can't afford to pay the nurses more money. Do we really need to give billions to Ukraine?
Well, I mean, America is rather more important for Ukraine than Britain. I mean, I have to say that Zelenskyy as a PR operator is absolutely brilliant. I mean, we did find him in a suit because we were looking. And of course, it was when he was a comedian. And then he would wear a suit. But now he's a war hero, so he doesn't. And I think, I mean, his trip to America was obviously to get a lot of money and to get a lot of support and to remind people, like Freddie, I mean, I worry about the end game because we're all so busy going, yes, yes, Ukraine, that we don't quite know what it is that we want. I mean, you know, we know what the Ukrainians want, which is Russia out and Russia...
Including the land that was taken in 2014 by Putin.
Precisely. And everybody's quite mushy on that.
Yeah. Well, and Russia is actually dialing up the rhetoric at the moment, very concerned about these escalations. They're very concerned about Belarus. I mean, they think America's strategy is to sort of cause a balkanization of Western Russia. And they're not going to go away easily. You know, I think this... You know, a lot of people think, oh, well, Putin will eventually be toppled. What happens if Putin's toppled? Do we think some nice, cuddly liberals could come in?
Somebody even worse.
Oh, no, because, I mean, Putin will be toppled by the right. Well, I mean, the people who are absolutely against Putin at the moment, I mean, obviously there is some opposition, but it's people who think that he's been ineffective in Ukraine.
Not tough enough.
Not people who think he should never have gone in the first place.
Insufficiently brutal.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's move to Brexit, if we can, Scarlett, and go to The Guardian. More than three-quarters of firms say the government's post-Brexit trade deal hasn't helped them grow their business. Why?
Because it's so difficult to trade outside Britain. Because Brexit is not working. I mean, it's just whether one voted for it or against it, what one has to say is the Brexit deals on offer don't work for business. And it's incredibly difficult. And day after day, you have people saying, well, you know, we lost this contract in Slovenia or Slovakia or wherever because they won't. It's too difficult to trade with Britain. You know, why did we ever get ourselves in this position? I mean, Boris Johnson promised us cake and eat it, and he said it would all be fine. Some of us were cynical at the time and thought it would never be fine. But actually, I keep asking, so what is the good thing about Brexit?
Well, if you're a fisherman, you'd be very happy because they did a deal with the EU, which is mean they're going to be catching tons more fish, announced only this week.
I think the defence of Brexit is that it's a generational change. Nobody who's sane thought that it would just be, you know, like a walk in the park. And that, you know, we're talking about improving Britain for the long-distant future. It is not going very well in some ways. However, I think with all these stories, it's very, very difficult to disentangle the effect of the pandemic from the effect of Brexit. And I think anybody who sort of glibly says, oh, it's because of Brexit or it's because of the pandemic is wrong. All these things have come together. It's a sort of perfect storm of awfulness. And it's unfortunate that Britain is going through a seismic change while this terrible event happened.
But I think because of the pandemic, that actually a lot of the problems of Brexit were put on the pandemic. I think exactly the opposite. I mean, I think that actually very, very little is because of the pandemic. I mean, the difficulty with dealing with Europe has got nothing to do with the pandemic, right?
Other countries in Europe, businesses are struggling too?
No, but businesses are struggling because they can't do exporting, because of the amount of paper. It's about paperwork, actually.
But it's also about supply chains, which is related to the pandemic.
And Ukraine.
And Ukraine, which is a huge one. Yeah, energy costs.
But it's also bureaucracy. The bureaucracy has multiplied.
The EU famously low on bureaucracy, of course.
I know, but when we were in it, it was easy.
Let's talk about Qatargate.
Oh, yes. I'm very happy to talk about Qatargate.
European Parliament.
Yeah.
For now, we're going to have to press pause. Freddie, Scarlett, thank you very much, both back in the studio with us in about 40 minutes' time to tangle through some more stories in the papers. Right now, though, it is 10 minutes to 7, and we've mentioned it a little bit, the impact of the cost of living crisis. But many of us are looking for a so-called side hustle to cope with the impact of a spiralling economy. And what's that having on people's day-to-day living costs? Well, we're joined now by Georgina Probert, a freelance magazine editor who started a side hustle called Her Hair, My Head. Scarlett, tell us more about it. When did you decide to start it and think, actually, I could do with that extra income?
Good morning. Well, I sort of started it as more of a passion project because I have hair loss myself and I wanted to find something to give me confidence and make me feel more empowered about my hair loss. So it very much started out as something for myself. But with the cost of living increases and money being more tight, I decided to turn it into more of a business to help other women. And actually, the past 2 months, I've managed to pay myself a wage from my side hustle. And I feel like it has become much more of a necessity as well as being something I'm really passionate about.
Do you make the wigs yourself?
No, I don't make them myself. It's a hugely, hugely skilled process. They're actually, they're called toppers, so they're like a half wig that clips onto the top of your head. There's lots of women who don't need a full wig, but they may have hair loss like me around here and around here, and a full wig is really daunting, but a topper just kind of clips on top. So this isn't my hair, this is all fake. There's a tiny bit of my hair underneath here, but it's just a different option for women with hair loss.
What really surprised you about setting up a side hustle that you now can claim a wage for? Did you think, oh my gosh, the complexities, sort of tax issues around this are going to be really difficult?
I got an accountant. That was one of the most important things. Running a business is really hard. There's so many different hats that you need to wear, like the social media, the sort of general running of the business. Sometimes I feel like a therapist because I spend quite a lot of time with women listening to their story about their hair loss and trying to help them, trying to find something that makes them feel good about themselves. So there's a lot of, it's a lot more complex than you think than just, oh, I'm going to set up this lovely business and make a bit more extra money.
Do you think it's more difficult for women facing hair loss than men?
Definitely. I think that people often think that we're vain because we have hair loss. And it's really accepted for men to lose their hair. The type of hair loss that I have, the androgenetic alopecia, I'm going bald like a man. I'm losing my hair from here and here with a bit of hair left. And it's not hugely attractive when I look at myself in the mirror. It doesn't make me feel good. But I've found a solution that makes me feel great and that I'm comfortable with. And I think that as women, you know, our hair is our crowning glory. And it does knock your confidence when you have to get up every day and look in the mirror and think, oh, what am I going to do with this? Whereas now I wake up, my hair's a mess, I shove this on, give it a quick brush, and I'm ready to go.
And you're earning money from this passion project that's helping other people as well. What kind of business mistakes did you make, lessons that might provide a tip to someone who thinks, oh, maybe I could try a side hustle too?
Don't think that you're an expert at everything and that you can do everything yourself. I've definitely learned that you need to outsource certain parts of the business that aren't your strength so that you can focus on what you're good at and what makes the business, essentially yours. So for me, that's my knowledge about hair loss, about the different types of toppers and wigs that are out there, and the empathy that I've got for other women, that I can help them because I've been through it. I'm my own customer. Whereas, say, for example, the accountancy side of things is just, I'm rubbish with numbers, so I outsource that. So don't put that pressure on yourself to know everything straight away, because you're never going to be able to do it all.
It's been brilliant hearing from you. Georgina, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time this morning.
She looked great, didn't she?
She looked amazing. And all those other pictures, if you were listening on the radio, you missed it. And we had lots of different pictures of Georgina in different wigs. Looking, well, totally beautiful.
I know. What can she do for me? Because I'm losing my hair.
I think your hair looks fine, I think.
Well, no, it's thinning, let me tell you. I'm getting a Friar Tuck look.
Your words, not mine, Andrew.
Yes.
Lots to come here on the programme. After the break, we're going to have more on our top story, the surge expected in patients today in the NHS following yesterday's ambulance strikes. That's to come after the weather.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather forecast from the Met Office. Bit of a foggy start in places, staying fairly damp, misty and murky across the south today, whereas further north we should see some brighter skies. Low pressure is moving away from the north, hence why it'll be drier than yesterday. But further south we've got a whole host of weather fronts just gradually edging in, bringing outbreaks of rain and drizzle across a good part of England and Wales. Eastern air is starting dry, but it is, as I say, quite misty and murky, some fog around, especially on some higher routes. Brighter skies for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but northerly winds setting in, bringing more showers across the far north of Scotland, falling as snow at times across the Northern Isles. No chance of that further south. It'll be rain and drizzle because it is really mild here, 11, 12 degrees Celsius, but it is turning colder again across northern Britain with those winds starting to pick up once more, though generally the winds, certainly for northern England, Northern Ireland, are a lot lighter than yesterday. During this evening, I think we're not going to see a great deal of change. Those northerly winds still bringing some showers in across northern Scotland. It might turn a bit icy as temperatures fall away, but further south it stays murky, misty again, some fog in places and rain returning to the far southwest by the end of the night. Very mild here. Temperatures may stay in double figures, but colder conditions setting in further north. And that north-south split continues into Friday morning. This band of rain could be pretty heavy. A lot of people hitting the roads on Friday, so just bear that in mind. It's going to generate a lot of spray and surface water spreading from south to north, getting into northern England and Northern Ireland, southern Scotland by the end of the day. Further south, it should brighten up during Friday afternoon. Still pretty mild here as well, although it will at times be windy. And again, I've got that big contrast between north and south. Low single figures across the north, much milder conditions further south. The milder air wins out through the Christmas period for all areas, mostly looking fairly grey for Christmas, but then it could well turn colder and brighter during Christmas Day from the northwest.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere. Amazing! You see, amazing! You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel. Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful. Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Well, the NHS is braced for a surge in demand after 999 calls plummeted during yesterday's ambulance strikes.
A very good morning. It's 7 o'clock now on Thursday, the 22nd of December. You're with Breakfast on GB News this morning with Andrew Pearce and me, Rosie Wright. Here's what's leading the news.
Well, the NHS faces that surge in patients from today after 999 calls dropped by 25% during yesterday's walkout. Senior doctors warn the fall in demand could mean people are suffering at home.
The Royal College of Nursing are going to schedule further strike action for January unless the government opens pay talks today. Now, that comes as nurses and midwives in Scotland rejected a 7.5% pay offer.
Against all odds and doom and gloom scenarios, Ukraine didn't fall. Ukraine is alive and kicking.
What a great man he is. That's the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy receiving a standing ovation after addressing the United States Congress in the past few hours. It was his first foreign trip since the start of the war, and he also had talks with President Joe Biden.
New analysis has revealed that drivers face their costliest Christmas getaway ever. The roads will see 20 million car trips over the holiday period, with the average price of petrol standing now at £1.53 per litre.
Do get in touch. It's the usual way via Twitter or email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Let us know where you're watching or listening to us from.
Now to our top story. NHS leaders are warning today that hospitals could face an extremely tough festive period. Particularly, they're expecting a surge of patients following yesterday's ambulance strikes.
So emergency calls dropped by 25% during the walkouts, which has sparked fears among some doctors the fall in demand could mean people are instead suffering at home.
Well, it comes as the deadline for the government to open pay talks with the Royal College of Nurses approaches. The union says unless discussions start today, they'll schedule more strikes for January.
And in Scotland yesterday, nurses and midwives rejected a pay offer of 7.5%.
Well, let's speak to the Scottish Shadow Health Secretary and GP, Dr Sandesh Kalane. Thank you very much for your time. What's gone wrong with that negotiation in Scotland then?
My pleasure and good morning. I think we need to be clear for your viewers that in Scotland, the SNP have run the Scottish Health Service, and they've done so for the past 15 years. And Hamza Yusuf in Chamber was talking about how he personally was negotiating. And what I was trying to explain to him is, yes, money is important. Of course it is. Nurses need to pay their bills. Nurses need to pay their mortgages. But it's also about terms and conditions. So if you listen to what the RCN are saying, that they've actually said that 8 out of 10 nurses are saying their last shift had patient safety dangers. That means 8 out of 10 nurses were going to work worried that they could lose their licence to practice because of errors and because of mistakes that could happen and patient suffering. It also is because there are 6,000 nurses short in Scotland. 6,000, let that number sink in. And that number is because Nicola Sturgeon, when she was in charge of health in Scotland, she actually cut nursing places. And so we're seeing this knock-on effect happening. So nurses are saying that it's not safe where they're working, their conditions are terrible, and this is something that needs improving as well. I've said this to him, Yusuf, myself many times, but he simply doesn't understand it, doesn't get it, and actually it's time that he was sacked or he left office because the patients don't trust him and the staff don't trust him.
You've mentioned bills for nurses. Of course, the point the RCN is making is a lot of nurses simply can't afford to pay their bills currently, and that pay rise of 7.5%, which they've just rejected, is way below the current inflation rate of 10.7%, or is even higher, or the higher version of the inflation. So what would you pay them?
Well, the first thing to say is it's not 7.5% across the board. It's 7.5%, which is graded. So it's less towards the higher end and it's higher towards the lower end of the pay scale. And in Scotland, what we're seeing here is an increase in taxes. So Scotland is the most taxed part of the United Kingdom. And so a lot of nurses are seeing any gains they've got completely wiped out by this increase in tax that the SNP seem to be absolutely determined to drive out anyone who earns any money in Scotland. Because they don't want people to be successful, it seems. That's quite simply what's going on here. Now, look, as I say, I'm not at the negotiating tables. I wish I was, because I'd be able to really chat to the nurses and try to drive through a deal. But I'm not. And what I would say is we need to make sure that nurses can go to work and feel as though they are valued, feel as though they are doing a shift which is safe. Imagine if you guys were going to work, or your viewers were going to work, and not knowing if that day somebody was going to die because of something that you couldn't control, because there was a lack of support, because there was a lack of equipment, because there was a lack of things going on that would have meant that somebody died. It'd be terrifying. And that's what nurses are facing day in and day out here in Scotland.
You would give them a pay rise, and of how much?
It's a very difficult question to answer, I'm afraid, because I'm not in the room negotiating with the nurses. I don't know what's been said. I don't know what exactly the nurses are saying. Well, the thing is, I wish I was, because if I was, then we'd be able to have a far better conversation. But we'd also be looking at conditions. And this is something that Holmes is not understanding, because you do need to look at the way that nurses are working. You do need to make sure that they're valued, they're getting things. Now, let me give you another example. At night shifts, we don't have everyone having access to hot meals. We don't have people having access to be able to rest. Nurses are struggling. Nurses aren't having any flexibility. So I know nurses that are quitting the NHS because they're being told you have to work a 12-hour shift, and they've got to pick up their kids. They've got caring responsibilities. That's simply something they can't do. So we need to be able to facilitate flexibility for our nurses as well. That is the type of thing that I would be doing and trying to get through, because it is not just about money. It's also about conditions. It's also about safety. And it's also about being valued.
Dr. Sandesh, thank you very much for speaking to us. I'm not sure we quite got the clarity we wanted on our answers, but we'll leave it there for now. We can get more analysis in the studio, because with us also is the Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib. What did you make of that interview?
Well, I mean, his heart's in the right place. He wants to give them a rise, but he's reluctant to commit a figure for fear of being pulled down on it. That's what I took away from, what I heard.
Scotland's the most taxed part of the United Kingdom.
He is right about that. He's absolutely right.
But actually, the elephant in the room, the United Kingdom is the most taxed it's ever been in 70 years.
Absolutely.
Under his government.
And most indebted. Most indebted and most taxed. Biggest budget. We talked about the need for funded tax cuts. Actually, what we need is the state to shrink and for taxes and regulations to be cut right across the board.
Doesn't that remind me of Liz Truss?
It does, and rightly so, because it was the right plan. It might have been cack-handedly executed, but her vision and her belief in reducing regulations and cutting taxes was absolutely right. Would I have cut the 45% tax rate as one of my first things? No. But I would have cut VAT, I would have cut tax on fuel, which would have reduced inflation immediately, taken the pressure off public sector pay increases. I would have absolutely reversed the corporation tax increase. I would have slashed business rates so that it was so businesses could go to work without actually being penalised for working. There's a whole host of things that could and should have been done. And no, Liz's tilt towards growth was absolutely the right thing. And sadly, the wokerati, if I can call them that, have seized on the implications that had for the gilt market in the immediate aftermath of the mini-budget. And they've utterly trashed the prospect of tax cuts and deregulation as a sane way to go forward. But Liz Truss was absolutely right. The Bank of England defenestrated her. It should have stood behind her. It should have buoyed the gilt market. It should have done whatever was necessary to ensure that she remained as Prime Minister and that her plan was implemented.
Let's broaden the conversation out a little bit on spending, because overnight we've been getting details of the meetings that have been happening between President Joe Biden and President Zelenskyy. Zelenskyy very much on this, I think we could say, sort of PR, but an appeal drive to say, don't forget about us, we need financial support. That's going to put a spotlight on Rishi Sunak and his spending priorities too.
It is, and I think we spent something like £2 or £3 billion already on funding the Ukrainian war effort. And, you know, when you put that in the context of the difficulties we're having funding our own public services, the cost of living crisis and so on, that's a very big number. But I mean, I think there are two things to really consider about Ukraine, and it's important not to forget this. When Russia first invaded, we all feared that there would be a kind of blitzkrieg across Ukraine, and before you know it, we would have Russian missiles on the Polish border. And that hasn't happened, and thank goodness that hasn't happened, because the whole geopolitical landscape of Europe would have been fundamentally changed against our security. So Zelenskyy and our support of Zelenskyy, and without which I don't think he would have made the fantastic strides he's had against the Russian invasion, that support has been invaluable from a geopolitical security perspective. Economically, the whole thing's been a disaster, hasn't it? Because, you know, we imposed sanctions, they've sanctioned us with energy. Germany had ridiculously made itself reliant, and virtually entirely, as far as I can see, on Russian oil and gas. And so we're going to be facing the knock-on domino effects of this war economically for a very long time. But was it necessary? Yes. Is our support of Zelenskyy necessary? Yes. Will that support wane over time because public opinion moves against Ukraine? The answer to that, sadly, is probably yes.
Can we ask you about those figures that came out in the last 24 hours about asylum applications? So in Britain, dear old Great Britain approved 72% of asylum applications. France, by contrast, a mere 23%. Are we a soft touch?
We are a soft touch. We're a soft touch from top to bottom, and we've seen that. All viewers watching will know intuitively that we're a soft touch, and you see it from the minute these dinghies enter our water. They're ferried onto Border Force boats or RNLI, given safe passage straight back to our shores, taken to a 4-star hotel, given free medical health care, free dentistry. Some are even given cash to spend. Now, what kind of service is that if we're trying to create a deterrent? You know, the whole point, the whole basis of our border control, with which I disagree, by the way, but the whole basis of our border control is deterrent. We're doing utterly the opposite of deterrent. We are showing these would-be migrants in Albania and elsewhere that actually we are a soft touch. If you want an easy ride, it's the United Kingdom you want to come to. In France, they don't get anywhere near the same treatment that they get here. They don't even get housed. 50% of them are having to find their own encampments.
That's why they're all coming here.
That's why they're coming here.
Ben, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Covering lots of different topics for us this morning. I'm sure you want to have your say at home. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Right now, 13 minutes past 7. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of the day's top stories.
Well, National Highway workers are the latest group to go on strike in London and the South East. They begin their industrial action today. The strike is going to carry on until Christmas Day. The Public and Commercial Services Union has acknowledged the walkouts are likely to inconvenience travellers, but blames the government for offering a below-inflation pay offer. Who's next to go on strike?
Cabinet Office Minister Oliver Dowden has agreed that Matt Hancock broke government rules by appearing on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here without first getting permission from Parliament's anti-corruption watchdog. A spokesperson for Mr Hancock maintains he did follow the rules and said the watchdog had got itself in a total muddle.
To confess, I watched a bit of that programme and I did vote for him to do some of those bush
Did
trials.
you?
I did.
Right.
I thought, and of course it helped him actually because he did it so well. Now, England forward Beth Mead has been voted the BBC's Sports Personality of the Year. She's the 27-year-old who scored 6 goals, providing 5 assists during England's successful Euro 2022 campaign. She beat a host of other stars, including England Test cricket captain Ben Stokes and 7 times world snooker champion Ronnie O'Sullivan to top that poll.
Now, 7:15, the UK remains on the edge of a recession following a decline in the country's gross domestic product figures in the third quarter of 2022.
The latest estimates show the economy shrunk by 0.3% between July and September, as current levels of real GDP remain lower than before the pandemic.
Meanwhile, real households' disposable income has dropped by 0.5% this quarter for the 4th quarter in a row.
Well, we've got the former chief economist at the Cabinet Office and Professor of Economics, Jonathan Portes, to talk us through it. Good morning to you, Professor.
Good morning.
So these figures are slightly worse than expected?
They are. They're what's called the second release. That is to say, we've already had these figures once before, and now they've been revised to reflect new data. And they have been revised down, as you said. So both for the last 2 quarters, what we've got here is somewhat worse than what we were originally told a couple of months ago. And this is something that actually tends to happen as the UK goes into a recession. We quite often see the initial figures revised down. That happened in 2008 as well. And this shows that, yes, as you said, our current level of output is now significantly lower than it was at the start of the pandemic. And it also shows that household incomes have been falling. And so in a sense, there'll be a lot of talk of, are we actually in a recession? What's the definition of recession anyway? But the fact that actual household incomes have been falling in real terms suggests that as far as households are concerned, yes, we are definitely in a recession.
And explain to us, if you can, which sectors particularly are struggling.
The sectors that are probably struggling most are, first of all, manufacturing and production. So the manufacturing sector is doing badly, as it has been for some time. There have also been, for some sectors within the service sector. So, of course, the service sector is by far the largest part of the economy overall. So some sectors are doing better than others. And the sectors that are doing worst are what you might call the sort of customer or consumer facing sectors. So we have sectors like business and professional services, information and communication, the city, those are doing okay. Whereas things like arts and recreation, wholesale and retail trade, transportation, they're doing less well. So it's sort of back to not quite, obviously not nearly as bad as it was during the pandemic, but some of those customer-facing sectors are not doing as well, and that probably reflects just that people don't feel that they have as much money to spend for obvious reasons.
And also, Professor, thinking about the hospitality industry, the retail figures we saw the other day weren't so good. The rail strike presumably is going to impact this and make it even worse for those sectors.
Yes, and of course, that's not really in these sets of figures to any significant extent, because this covers only the third quarter. So we are now, of course, almost at the end of the fourth quarter. So in that sense, these figures are a little bit out of date. The fourth quarter will show the impact of the rail strikes as well. That's likely to reduce output. As well as some of the other strikes. So in a sense, we've probably got some more not particularly good news to come.
Jonathan Portes, thank you very much for speaking to us. Really appreciate your time. Professor of Economics at King's College London, appreciate it. The strike action, it's not going anywhere.
No. I think public support for this train strike is is going down pretty sharply, actually. I think the decision to go on strike over Christmas, when they said they wouldn't, has cost them a lot of public goodwill, I think.
How much does that harm, let's say, the nurses going on strike? Because there is already strike fatigue that's set in before they say, right, we're walking off too.
And I'm pretty sure in Number 10 and in the Department of Health, they're determined not to settle the nurses, give the nurses more money while the rail workers are still on strike, because they don't want to encourage them. They want to sort that one first. And I think that could collapse in January. My prediction.
When does this get resolved then?
Well, I think the nurses' strike could go on for months, because Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, is, some would say, intransigent. They're not budging. And what will disappoint the government is now that the 7.5% in Scotland, which have been hailed as a sign of what happens when you talk, because Nicola Sturgeon's government talked to the unions, it seemed that the 7.5% pay rise was going to be accepted. It's just been rejected. So that means the government's going to be even less likely now to settle with the nurses in England, Wales and Northern Ireland.
Angeline's got in touch. Very good morning. Who says people will lose sympathy eventually. The whole country, you could say, deserves a pay rise, but we want inflation to come down. Life is difficult for everyone, not just the nurses. People in the community and carers are also very poorly paid, mostly on minimum wage, and they're not striking.
No. And Nige says, don't give any wage rises until they get rid of middle management and up productivity. Did you see that advertisement the other day in the NHS? A director of lifestyle achievement or something? £115,000 a year. A nonsense job.
Let me know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk is our email address. Don't go anywhere. After the break, we're going to go through all the day's big sports stories as Beth Mead wins Sports Personality of the Year. Paul Coit will join us.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
It's 25 minutes past 7. Welcome back to breakfast. A Christmassy, festive breakfast, I think.
Hope so, yeah.
There's lots to come on the programme. Should you be composting your leftovers and reusing your wrapping paper? Are you going to do either of those?
No.
I didn't think so. At 7:45, we are. If you are interested in having a sustainable Christmas, we'll give you the tips.
Yeah. And of course, at 8:20, as we prepare to gorge ourselves on rich food and alcohol over the holidays, that man, Dr. Michael Mosley, is going to tell us how we can keep our guts healthy, including his surprising tip about what to do when you prepare your spuds for the Christmas roast.
I know the tip already, and I'm certainly not going to do it. You
No.
can decide if you've got the time a little later on. Please get in touch with us. gbviews@gbnews.uk. That can be on Christmas to strikes to sport.
And Paul Coyte joins us now to talk about the latest and biggest sports stories, bearing in mind that I know nothing about sport, but I do know...
That's not true.
I do...
You knew about darts last week.
I did.
You were very good with the
Yeah.
darts last
I
week.
thought you were taking me to the darts.
Well, there's a very good chance we can do that if you want to go.
I think
Can
I think
I'd be
about
more
it?
interested in ABBA. You
Yeah,
know,
I
if you
would,
could do
yeah.
that. Seen Mamma Mia 30 times.
I'll go to the darts, you come to Mamma Mia with me.
OK, fine. Listen, this may surprise you. I was a member of the ABBA fan club many years ago.
Oh.
I
Who's your
very-
favourite member of the band?
I was always Agneta. Always. Always Agneta Falskog.
I've met her.
Have you?
Yes.
Goodness me.
Not a bit of name
This is the
dropping
first time
here.
I don't
There's
want
a
to
lot
talk
of
about
showing
sports.
off going on right now. Shall we actually talk about sports?
Yes, let's do that. That's
and
a very good
something
idea.
you do like, Andrew, personality, sports
Yeah.
personality of the year.
Yes.
We have a winner.
We do, and that's Beth Mead. Beth Mead, the Lioness, the goal-scoring sensation, and the first female footballer to win sports personality.
Why do they call it personality of the year when we don't know much about her personality? Why don't they just say sports person or sportsman or woman of the
I
year?
think we can blame that for going back 64 years, because they did that. The first one was Christopher Chataway. Now, Chris Chataway, who not only a journalist and a frontman on the news...
Wasn't he in that 4-minute mile with Roger Bannister?
And you're saying you don't know anything about
Well, that's history. He was he ran ahead of him. He was like
he was a pacemaker.
Pacemaker. That's
so
the
there was
expression.
Roger Bannister when he broke the 4-minute mile, and there was Chris Chataway, and there was Hugh Brasher.
Right.
Chris Brasher, sorry, because he was the son. And that's what he was famous for. So he was the first ever winner of Sports Personality of the Year. And trust me, he was a personality. And then you go through the years, and Henry Cooper, and David Hemery, and David Beckham, and everybody seems to have won it. So I don't think they're really suddenly going to go, you know what, we can't really call it personality anymore.
And I'm going to surprise you and tell you I know who David Hemery is.
Do you really?
He won the high hurdles at the 1968 Mexico Olympics.
Unbelievable. It's correct.
You're amazed by that.
I am truly stunned. I have
correct. And it was worth it just to see that smile on your face,
and I was
to feel like you've just won Trivial Pursuit on Christmas
I know,
Day.
and I was a mere 7 at the time. Now, what about this Lionel Messi bloke? He's world sports star of the year,
I
is
mean,
he?
they have lots of awards on the night. World Sports Star is Lionel Messi. World Cup winner, of course, we know about what happened on Sunday and Argentina winning the World Cup. There was a lifetime achievement, so I don't know when they decide now is the time, because Usain Bolt won that award and he was already retired anyway, but thought, OK, he's the one that we're going to give the Lifetime Achievement Award. And then we've got the young sports personality. This is an 18-year-old by the name of Jessica Gadarova, who is a gymnast. And she was I think it's only the 5th Briton ever to win a world title, and it's a floor exercise. There she is.
Good on her.
It's amazing, but the thing is she's got an identical sister as well. Now, I don't know whether that's Jennifer or if that's Jessica. I believe that's Jessica. There we are. And Jennifer is the sister who is also a gymnast, but it's always got to be tricky when you're twins.
Sibling rivalry.
And sibling rivalry when one is doing very well and the other one is doing quite well, but not quite as well as the other one.
Now, there was a Lifetime Achievement Award given to Usain Bolt,
Yes, we
even
just did
though
that, yeah.
he retired, though, in 2017. So why would he
Have you
get
been
the
thinking
award
about
now?
that for a while since I just said that?
Just a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Well, as I say, Lifetime Achievement Award, it's one of those, you'll sit round and think, right, I know, who hasn't got this gong yet? Let's give it Usain Bolt.
So maybe Ronnie O'Sullivan will get it at one point.
I'm pretty sure... Sorry?
Maybe Ronnie O'Sullivan will get it at one point.
Well, the thing is, Ronnie O'Sullivan, 7 times world champion, and there's the problem with snooker is that is it as popular as other sports? And people thinking, well, I mean, we've got Matt...
It's so boring, snooker. Oh, my God.
Now, look, I don't believe that during the 80s in the sports heyday, that during Steve Davis and Dennis Taylor, you weren't invested in the snooker.
No, Steve Davis, I heard him interviewed once. I nearly fell asleep.
Did you really?
Really boring.
But listen, snooker is a thing of its day because at the time...
Sorry, this doesn't seem to be about sport anymore. It's just like Quiz Andrew.
It is. Let's ask, do you know who this is?
Yeah.
But snooker at the time was huge. If we look back to the late 70s, early 80s, and then that was a situation where there wasn't that much sport on TV, whereas now there's so much. So when that was on TV and on terrestrial TV, everybody watched it because it was some of the only sport that we would see.
Not everybody.
From you,
I definitely
who was
didn't
watching
watch
ABBA
it.
the movie for the 58th time.
Very quickly, football, bring us up to speed.
Yeah, let's bring you up to date. Carabao Cup last night. So Manchester United beat Burnley 2-0. Blackburn lost to Nottingham Forest. Now, the big surprise was Charlton Athletic. They beat Brighton yesterday. Now, Charlton Athletic way down in League One. They beat Brighton, of course, of the Premier League. But they have players like Alexis McAllister, who is an Argentinian, who's still over in Argentina. So the thing is, the club have been, very nice to him and said, look, if you want to celebrate, you can celebrate. But with a World Cup when it is, the Premier League and the Carabao Cup gets going straight away, so everybody needs to get back. Usually with the Summer World Cup, they get a little break, but it's pretty much come back straight away. And it's Kylian Mbappe, great PSG player, the French player. He's back to training as well. And there's people going, oh, isn't it amazing that after the World Cup, he's gone back to training? Not really, because it's his job and he's in his peak.
How many millions do they get paid, these footballers?
I agree with you there. You know
Get on
what?
with
If
it.
it's the end of a season, that's one thing, but it's in the middle of a season.
Yeah.
So the World Cup's over, back to the domestic game.
Exactly.
Paul, thank you so much for bringing us to the sports news and an education and a quiz this morning.
You know what? It's Christmas.
Exactly.
It's Christmas.
There's lots to come. After the break, we're going to be going through the papers once again. Freddie Gray and Scarlett Maguire will be joining us in the studio. Don't miss it.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us. We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
25 minutes to 8. Welcome back to Breakfast on GB News. And let's bring you up to date with the day's front pages.
The Express is leading on fears the sick are suffering from home after emergency calls plummeted during yesterday's ambulance strikes.
The Times says the health service faces an extremely tough festive period as demand rebounds, they predict, after paramedic strikes.
And it's also the main story for The Telegraph, which is focusing on the fact NHS staff may be offered a fast-track pay deal to end the strikes next year, not the strikes this year. It also covers the hero's welcome received by Ukrainian President Zelenskyy on his extraordinary trip to the United States.
The Daily Mail leads on what they say could be the costliest Christmas getaway on record, with diesel almost £15 more expensive than this time last year.
And finally, The Star asks, where's Rishi? They claim the Prime Minister is missing in action while the whole country goes on strike and the NHS is falling apart.
Well, let's delve inside the papers. Joining us again to do it this morning is Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and also the former Labour advisor, Scarlett Maguire. Brilliant to have you both back in the studio. Let's start with the Mail, if we can, Freddie, and the statistics when it looks at how many asylum claims Britain claims, and that is in sharp contrast to that of France.
Yes, I think everybody knew this was probably the case, but the extent of it is quite shocking, to me anyway, quite shocking. Britain grants 72% of asylum claims. In France, it's just 25%. Obviously, look, you could interpret that we're a much more generous nation. However, this is a huge political story, and the government knows it. They know it's a great weakness for them because they've been saying they're going to fix it for a decade now, and they haven't. And then underneath that story in the Mail, you have the cost, which is a lot of the other papers have picked up on, which is £3.5 billion a year, the cost of housing migrant hopefuls. Up from 2.1 billion, which is a hell of a jump. So this is a very, very expensive and serious and important story. And we need to talk about it. The government needs to address it.
So why, is there a view as to why we are so generous? I was talking to Ben Habib, the former Brexit Party MEP earlier. I said, are we just simply a soft touch?
We're a soft touch. I mean, I think you could also say that it's to do with Brexit, in that European migration slowed. And so we increased migration from... People who say that sort of migration has disappeared because of Brexit are wrong. It's just changed. It's much more oriented towards outside Europe now. So that's part of it. I do think we're a soft touch in that the French have been much better at just flouting European regulations for a long time. And they get away with it.
No, I think... absolutely not. I think that what...
I mean, I don't know why it's 72%, but certainly we're tough on asylum claims. The biggest problem here, and the reason it's so expensive, is...
I mean, we're just statistically not tough.
No, I mean, by the time... Who are the people coming over in small boats? Because that's what we're really talking about, right? They are the people who are the most desperate. They are the people who think... But more important is we have an asylum system that is practically broken, right? 4% of asylum claims were processed last year. The reason we've got billions, we're spending billions on hotels, is because we're not processing asylum claims. That's what we should be doing. We should not be having migrants, asylum seekers in hotels. We should be processing their claims and saying yes or no, and then they can get on with their lives, and we don't have to put them up in. It is completely ridiculous.
I will not argue with you that the asylum system is broken. It quite clearly is. But I mean, I think it's just not true to say that we're tough on asylum claims, because we're not.
And also, just looking at anecdotally at the images on GB News of the people coming off the small boats, Scarlett, they're all young men. They're all under 30. They're economic migrants. Come on, they're not all fleeing persecution. There's no war in Albania.
And the Albanians
they're a third of the people.
And the Albanians are being sent home, right? Talk to the government. Talk to the government about the fact they don't... But actually, who are the people who are most likely to be tortured? They are young men, right? Who are the people who go on demonstrations? They are young men. I mean, they are the people most likely to be troubled. Just because it's young men doesn't mean they're economic migrants, right? But actually, if we processed them, then we wouldn't be having these theoretical arguments about whether they are or are not refugees. But, I mean, what's interesting is how many are found to be refugees, but they have to wait, 4 or 5 years.
But why are we finding so many refugees and France isn't? Because they're adopting a tougher criteria.
No, but a lot of...
And they're pushing them on through France, and they end up in Britain.
I don't think the French are pushing them on to us. I think they're being slightly laissez-faire. I think pushing them on. The people who are...
But they're certainly pushing them back in Italy. At Ventimiglia, there's a military presence.
Yeah.
And the French are being very tough on that border. So they're tougher on migrants. I mean, I just think that's indisputable.
But also, the other thing is, I mean, if you look at France and Germany and Italy and Greece, I mean... the tens of thousands of migrants, refugees that they take in every year. I mean, it's absolutely massive, right? So actually, we don't have that many. I mean, if you look at our immigration figures...
6,000 already this year.
If you look at our immigration figures, most are Ukraine, Hong Kong, and...
The ones crossing the Channel are Ukraine and Hong Kong.
Well, then
46,000 is unacceptable, Scarlett.
No, what is unacceptable is that they're not being processed, is that they're being put up in hotels for months, if not years, right? And nothing is being done because we like to spend billions on hotels, millions thinking about Rwanda, which isn't going to happen for months and months if it ever happens. And what we're not doing is dealing with the problem in front of us. The problem in front of us is actually about processing asylum claims, and that should be done fast.
And the question, I guess, is why is it that when they are processed, 72% say, yeah, you can stay here, whereas France is saying, no, significantly less. Please get in touch with your views. gbviews@gbnews.uk. I fear we could talk about this for the duration of the entire review. So let's try not to do that and move on briefly if we can. Let's go to the Telegraph. And this is a story that developed, over the last day or so. What's changed under Taliban rule in Afghanistan in terms of women's rights to education?
It is so depressing. So in the last day or so, we've had that women aren't allowed to go to university. But this story is saying women aren't allowed to go to primary school. So basically, women are being shut out of the education system, but also they're not allowed to go to mosque. I mean, basically, women are prisoners in their homes. They get brought up, with a father running it, and they can only move when they get married. They move from one home to another, and it is terrible. I mean, and what's so awful is that we gave them a taste of what it's like to really live. And I remember, I I went to Afghanistan, and it was incredible. If you went in the morning, if you were driving in the morning, you have all these little girls in school uniform going off to school. I mean, they were desperate to be educated, and now it's terrible.
So should we, as a country, then withhold our international aid we give to Afghanistan to try and not so much punish them, but say if you don't get girls back into education, you're not going to get our billions?
I think we do need to leave it. I mean, the problem is that Afghanistan is a terribly, terribly poor country, and people are literally starving there, and presumably it's going to be another terrible winter. But we cannot go on allowing the Taliban to basically disenfranchise in every single way half the country.
We talked about Joe Biden in the last section, didn't we, and Ukraine. I mean, of course, a lot of this failure is on America. It was a 20-year war that they got completely wrong. The Potemkin state they set up collapsed as soon as possible, and Ashraf Ghani fled, unlike Zelenskyy, who bravely stayed. And I think what it possibly shows is that, in Ukraine, the reason it's going, fingers crossed, well for the Western side, is that we are not, or the West, America, is not militarily involved in the way that it tried in Afghanistan. It tried to just set up, it's obviously a completely different country, so it's not a very good comparison. But it tried to create a state out of nothing, and it failed. And Biden ended it, which was very messy and bad, and a sort of embarrassment to America. But I think perhaps it was the right thing to do, because the American occupation was not working.
Yeah, and it was an occupation where people were basically told who to vote for, and I mean it never empowered the Afghans, right? And the amount of corruption.
It did get girls back into the club.
No, I'm not. I mean, I'm not saying that good things didn't happen. I mean, certainly good things happened, but I am agreeing with Freddie that actually what really and the same thing with Iraq is, I mean, the point is the Americans go in and they're good at, shock and awe, and they're not good at building civil society.
Let's look to China, if we can, and move on to The Guardian, Freddie.
Yes.
China are sort of changing the metrics at how they're measuring COVID deaths.
Well, the Chinese have always done this. I mean, they've had incredibly low COVID death counts, and yet nobody can quite believe them because you can't trust anything the Chinese government says. There is clearly a massive wave of COVID going on in China at the moment. And China, because it's had its zero COVID policies and cut them so strictly, has very low, and it's not sufficiently vaccinated, has not very good immunity to COVID. So the reports we're hearing is that mortuaries are filling up. There's obviously deaths happening in China. But the government has just, in very communist style, just recategorised COVID deaths. So they're now down to zero again, which I think tells you a lot about the way the Chinese government works.
And there had been sort of an unprecedented, really, people were objecting to the restrictions, partly because they saw the World Cup and saw how much freedom people had in...
Yeah, and I mean, what's so awful is that China has this zero COVID policy, which every other country knows doesn't work. And they only use their own drugs, which actually are not as effective as the drugs that everybody else is taking. And so these poor Chinese people who have almost no immunity, I mean, it is frightening, one would think, how many people are probably dying from COVID, let alone having their whole lives turned upside down.
Although I suppose we can't be too smug about it. I mean, there was the dying with or dying of category distinction that we never got right. For a long time in Britain. So because COVID is so complicated and we don't quite know the effects it has on the heart, the circulatory system, what are COVID deaths has never quite been distinguished. But that's not to say that the Chinese government aren't obviously fiddling the stats.
Let's leave it on that note for now, if we can. Freddie, Scarlett, thank you both very much. They'll join us again in the studio in about 40 minutes' time to tangle through the papers again.
Well, let's bring you up to date with today's top stories.
The ONS says GDP fell by 0.3% in the third quarter of this year. Now, although the services sector saw slight growth between July and September, the production sector fell by 2.5%. The ONS also says households' disposable income fell by 0.5%.
And the Health Secretary is reportedly keen to speed up the process to give NHS staff a pay rise early next year. A source close to Steve Barclay, pretty much the Minister to be honest, the Telegraph says the government could now fast-track a pay increase after 48 hours of those first ever nursing strikes.
The RAC says motorists are being heartlessly overcharged with record fuel prices over the Christmas break. The average price of a litre of petrol is currently around 153 pence. That's 7 pence more than this time last year. Diesel is up 176 pence. That's up 27.
Now, it is the season of gift-giving, family reunions and overfilled plates of indulgent treats. But what happens with all the wrapping paper, the trees and the leftovers once Christmas is over?
Well, recycling expert Sarah Perry joins us now for her top tips on how to go green this Christmas. A very good morning to you. I have to say, there is a real eco-activist in my family, so I feel like over the last few years I've had my sort of socks pulled up when it comes to green credentials. But what is the easiest way, the sort of low headache way, to make sure Christmas doesn't cost too much environmentally?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me. And we all need to be looking at more sustainable choices at Christmas. We know that nearly 90% of people are really conscious that climate change is happening and want to make different choices at home so that they can have a more sustainable Christmas. You touched on the season of giving, and let's face it, when I think of Christmas, and I'm sure when lots of us think of Christmas, presents is a really important part of what we think about. In the UK, we use enough wrapping paper every year to wrap the planet 9 times entirely.
God, and shocking
it's now extraordinary. And we are, we're throwing away and not recycling nearly half of that. So that, for me, is one of the main areas where we can all make a big difference. Using it a bit more wisely, so use less, good for the pocket, good for the planet, and also to check when we're buying it that it is actually recyclable. That's got to be a really important thing to do, and then make sure we separate it after all of that fun present opening and make sure it goes in the right bin.
Is there any wrapping paper in particular we should be avoiding?
Oh, yes. And there's a really easy tip, which hopefully you may already know from the eco warrior in your family. However, if you do get a big pile, hopefully a huge pile of wrapping paper after all the presents you've got, pick up your piece of paper, give it a scrunch, and if it stays scrunched like this, then it can be recycled. Simple as that. If it pops back open, it means it's foil or got a kind of plastic lining on it, which means it can't go in your recycling bin. But scrunchy like this means it can be recycled.
But if you scrumple it up, you can't reuse it to wrap something else.
Well, if you've scrumpled it and it's popped back open, then you can reuse it, of course. So you can recycle the ones you've scrumpled to test out. Use a little bit, not all of it. And then the ones that have popped back open, you could reuse for something else, or use even as my mum always used to use things for drawer linings at the bottom of drawers. So
that's a nice idea. So we sort of tackled presents, but what about the dinner table? Because we know food excess is going to be sort of, in excess on Christmas Day.
Absolutely. And we know that food waste can increase by nearly 80% around Christmas, which is a huge thing. The main way to avoid that is, of course, just to buy a little less and cook what you actually need to cook for the people that you're celebrating with. It's very tempting to have huge spreads, but choosing a little less is good for your pocket, good for the planet. And then use up those leftovers really wisely. You can freeze cheese, for example. So if there's loads of that cheese board left over, you can keep some for later. And then anything that is finally scraps, if you have food waste recycling in your area, make sure that goes into your food waste recycling bin to divert that away from where it would be unnecessarily go to landfill.
And can you cook sustainably?
I can, absolutely, and everyone can. So if you make choices like using your hobs in your oven wisely, for example, cook a couple of things at the same time in your oven, that's sustainable and really relevant at the moment with our energy prices as they are. You can also make sure that you are, where possible, choosing any ingredients that are more locally sourced, for example, or seasonal. We're not here to tell people how to to choose or what they should choose, but by making little differences, you can make a really big impact. And it's those little choices that people can make that are within their gift that can make a sustainable Christmas.
And so probably most people have sort of already got an idea of what's on the table, or they've already done the supermarket shop and they know it's coming. But if we could choose a greener, more alternative main course, what should it be?
Well, I would always go for a lovely bit of poultry myself. So where are we looking at chickens? Perhaps think about a chicken instead of a whole huge turkey. If there's, you're feeding 4 of you, maybe you don't want to eat turkey for the next 2 weeks afterwards. Maybe go for a chicken instead. That could be a great idea. And I think there'll probably be a lot of Veolia Christmases that have chickens on the table instead of turkeys, keeping in line with a bit of Christmas. Yeah.
Sarah, thank you so much. Sarah Perry, recycling expert, giving us tips and tricks. Andrew, has it persuaded you?
Turkey or chicken for you at Christmas?
We always have turkey,
yeah.
But that's just tradition.
Yeah.
And that's probably the only time of the year I eat it, really.
Yeah, I'm quite intrigued by the wrapping paper stuff because I can't wrap up well. I'm very bad, and I end up using 3 sheets when I should only need 1.
Oh, no.
I'm going to go for brown paper and say I'm environmentally friendly.
Are you actually going to do that? Can we see proof, please, on Christmas Day?
Probably not.
Well, it hasn't persuaded Derek, who just says, stop spoiling Christmas, it's one day, grow up. I'm sorry about that, Derek. Bah humbug. Don't go anywhere. After the break, we've got more on the deadline from the government to open pay talks with nurses. That's next.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather forecast from the Met Office. Bit of a foggy start in places, staying fairly damp, misty and murky across the south today, whereas further north we should see some brighter skies. Low pressure is moving away from the north, hence why it'll be drier than yesterday, but further south we've got a whole host of weather fronts just gradually edging in, bringing outbreaks of rain and drizzle across a good part of England and Wales. Eastern areas starting dry, but it is, as I say, quite misty and murky, some fog around, especially on some higher routes. Brighter skies for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but northerly winds setting in, bringing more showers across the far north of Scotland, falling as snow at times across the Northern Isles. No chance of that further south. It'll be rain and drizzle because it is really mild here, 11, 12 degrees Celsius, but it is turning colder again across northern Britain with those winds starting to pick up once more, though generally the winds, certainly for Northern England, Northern Ireland, are a lot lighter than yesterday. During this evening, I think we're not going to see a great deal of change. Those northerly winds still bringing some showers in across northern Scotland. It might turn a bit icy as temperatures fall away, but further south it stays murky, misty again, some fog in places and rain returning to the far southwest by the end of the night. Very mild here. Temperatures may stay in double figures, but colder conditions setting in further north. And that north-south split continues into Friday morning. This band of rain could be pretty heavy. A lot of people hitting the roads on Friday, so just bear that in mind. It's going to generate a lot of spray and surface water spreading from south to north, getting into northern England and Northern Ireland, southern Scotland by the end of the day. Further south, it should brighten up during Friday afternoon. Still pretty mild here as well, although it will at times be windy. And again, got that big contrast between north and south. Low single figures across the north, much milder conditions further south. The milder air wins out through the Christmas period for all areas, mostly looking fairly grey for Christmas, but then it could well turn colder and brighter during Christmas Day from the northwest.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
The NHS braces for a surge in demand today after 999 calls plummeted yesterday during ambulance strikes.
Well, good morning. It's 8 o'clock on Thursday, December the 22nd. This is Breakfast on GB News with Rosie Wright and me, Andrew Pearce. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
The NHS faces a surge in patients after 999 calls dropped by 25% during yesterday's ambulance walkouts. Senior doctors are warning that the fall in demand could mean people are suffering at home.
And the Royal College of Nursing is scheduling further strike action for next month unless the government opens pay talks. And today, it comes as nurses and midwives in Scotland have now rejected a 7.5% pay offer.
Against all odds and doom and gloom scenarios, Ukraine didn't fall. Ukraine is alive and kicking.
Well, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy received a standing ovation as he addressed the United States Congress in Washington. It's his first foreign trip since the start of the war. He also met for talks with President Biden.
And a new analysis has revealed drivers are facing their costliest Christmas getaway ever. The roads are going to see around 20 million car trips over the holiday period, and the average price of petrol now £1.53 per litre.
So if it's fuel prices, strikes, or maybe just how you're celebrating Christmas, please do get in touch with us. gbviews@gbnews.uk and let us know where you're watching or listening to us this morning.
To our top story, NHS leaders warning that hospitals are facing an extremely tough festive period with a surge in patient numbers expected after the ambulance strikes yesterday.
Well, 999 calls dropped by 25% during the walkouts, with fears now among senior doctors that that fall in demand could mean that people didn't ring and just suffered at home instead.
And it comes as the deadline for the government to open pay talks with the nursing union approaches. The Royal College of Nurses says unless discussions start today, there'll be more strikes in January.
So let's find out more, particularly on the government's response. Our political reporter Olivia Utley is outside the Department of Health. A very good morning to you, Olivia. So the pressure is on for talks to be held today, particularly with the nurses, or we're going to see significant strike action continue.
Good morning. Yes, the pressure has been really ramped up today, but it still doesn't really look as though Steve Barclay is going to enter serious talks about pay. What's put a bit of wind in his sails? It's been a bad couple of days for Steve Barclay. The polls show that support for nurses is still very high, and polls also show that 41% of people blame the government for these strikes and the chaos that they're causing. But what has put some wind in his sails today is that nurses in Scotland have just rejected a pay offer from Nicola Sturgeon, which would see the lowest paid nurses' pay hiked by 11%, and those on higher bands hiked by sort of 6 or 7%. And they've got a better deal for working hours. And that deal has been rejected anyway. And a similar deal in Britain in England would cost around 13 billion. So Steve Barclay's argument that it's just impossible, we just don't have the money to fund anything like the sort of pay rises that Pat Cullen and the RTN are asking for, is standing a little bit more ground today. That has helped him a bit. But there's still this enormous gulf between what the Royal College of Nursing is asking for and what Steve Barclay is prepared to or can actually give.
Olivia, there was some surprise, I think, that that pay offer was rejected in Scotland because it had been held up as an advantage of what you get if you sit down and talk with the unions.
Absolutely, and for a while now we've been talking about how what's happened in Scotland is a sort of model for what could be happening in England. Nurses were offered a £2,200 pay rise, a flat pay rise, which for those on the lowest end of the earning spectrum actually does amount to higher than inflation. And it has been said by union leaders, they've been on GB News saying this, that were a similar deal to be offered in England, that would essentially solve the problem. But now that offer has been rejected, it's becoming clear that it's harder than it seems to find a way through with the nurses. So reaching some sort of reasonable negotiation is looking a little bit harder than it did yesterday. But paradoxically, as I say, that actually almost helps Steve Barclay and Rishi Sunak's case, because the argument that they've been making all along is that it's a reasonableness argument, that it's just impossible, that what nurses are demanding in England, 19% pay rise, simply is not feasible and would lead to an inflationary spiral. And now the nurses in Scotland have rejected a very, what the government would say is a very generous pay deal. It sort of helps that case a little bit.
Olivia, thank you very much, our political reporter outside of the Department of Health this morning. Of course, if and when those talks do get underway, we'll keep you up to date here on GB News. For now, though, listening to that was the former Home Office and Liberal Democrat Minister, Norman Baker. Norman, a very good morning to you.
Morning.
So the blame game escalating now between the government and the unions. Who do you think's to blame?
And the patients are in the middle. Well, I think both are being unreasonable, to be honest with you. It's not sensible to ask for 19%, which is inflation's 11.5 plus 7.5% they've lost in real terms since 2010. That's how they get to that figure. But nor is it reasonable for the government to say that we're going to stick to the recommendation from some independent pay body, which was set long before inflation kicked in its present form. And, you know, people don't want these nurses on strike. The nurses, I don't think, want to be on strike. The government doesn't want them on strike. So we have to find a way out of this. Perhaps a way out of it to save face is a one-off payment this year, which is not part of the normal wage structure, but it's a sort of bonus payment for Christmas or something, which gets them through this year and lets the pay body look at things afresh next year. That might be the answer.
That was sort of touted, but then the Prime Minister poured cold water on that.
Well, I think he's foolish to do so, to be honest with you, and I don't think this refusal to talk about pay. I mean, what are they talking about when you meet the nurses? Steve Barclay talking about the cricket? Is he talking about Christmas shopping? I mean, he's got to talk about pay.
The Royal College of Nursing has rejected this pay offer in Scotland. Pretty surprising, Norman, because it was being hailed as the way forward. The Scottish government, led by Nicola Sturgeon, sitting down talking to the union about pay. 7.5%, as Olivia Utley pointed out, the lowest paid are getting an 11% pay rise. That's pretty good going.
It is quite good going, and I'm surprised, the same as you are, about the rejection. I can only think it's part of the general mood of irritation and militancy against the governments of the UK, which has permeated through to Scotland. But it's not a good outcome, I have to confess, and it's not quite clear what will happen next in Scotland.
How do you predict it's going to fall out?
It's got to be, we've got a binary position whereby the government says it refused to talk about pay and the nurses refuse to accept where they are with an independent pay body. Those two binary positions are not sustainable. There's got to be ground given, and I think, as I say, the way forward is some sort of interim bonus payment which lets the government say they have not had a pay increase, but lets the nurses get more money. That's got to be the way forward.
Politically, what's the risk for the government here? Picking a fight with nurses, not easy for a Tory government because everybody loves the nurses.
Well, I can tell you as well that as a politician, ex-politician, that health is always the main issue on the doorstep.
Right.
It's the one that trumps the economy even.
Really?
And if they're going to have people worrying about getting to hospital, worrying about ambulance drivers being on strike, worrying about what care there is when they get there, if they get there, then that's going to be very damaging for the government, I think. And as you say, Andrew, we've got the situation where the people at large, the population at large, is on the side of the nurses. Picking a fight with the real women is one thing, picking a fight with the nurses is something else.
Can we talk to you about something else very briefly?
Yeah.
President Joe Biden, President Zelenskyy met in the Oval Office overnight. A big conversation and a big PR drive from Zelenskyy to say, do not forget about us. We urgently need your support. What repercussions is that going to have for us here?
Well, for us here, I think it reinforces the government's view, which actually, despite some chaos in the government in the last year, has been pretty consistently supportive of Ukraine, which I think is right, and it reinforces the position that the government's taken over here. But I think let's just bear in mind that it was a risk for Zelenskyy leaving his country in the middle of a war. That's a risk for one thing. Secondly, he's the first foreign leader at war to address the US Congress since Churchill in 1941, so that's a big deal, standing ovation he got. And I also just think we sometimes take for granted that people speak English. You know, how many people could go to, I don't know, France or Germany or Italy or Spain and speak in their language? Here's this guy from Ukraine speaking pretty good English to the US Congress. So he was Man of the Year, I think it'd be called Man of the Year, and quite rightly so. The guy was a light entertainer who became president. He couldn't have anticipated this. And, you know, cometh the hour, cometh the man.
He was right to wear those war fatigues as well, wasn't he?
He was, I think, yes. He got to reinforce the fact that a war is going on. Had he turned up looking smart like you, Andrew, it would have sent the wrong message.
Yeah.
Well, we very much enjoyed your jumper. Very Christmassy.
Is that the Christmas star, the one above which led the wise men?
I'm not quite sure who the wise men are in my case, but no, this is actually a Tibetan jumper, but it sort of doubles as a Christmas jumper. Right. But some of my friends think it's an advert for a coffee shop, but other coffee shops are available.
Are you having a sustainable Christmas lunch? Did you hear our
conversation? I am having a sustainable Christmas
really?
lunch.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's on the menu?
A mushroom Wellington.
Oh my gosh.
Are you making it?
I wouldn't quite say I'm making it. I'm sort of helping with this process.
Or is your wife making it? Is your wife making it?
No, it's going to go in the oven.
Right. Sounds fascinating.
It is. It's very nice.
It sounds nice and easy and relaxing. Norman, thank you very much. You'll join us again in the next hour here on Breakfast. We could have asked Norman as well about transport because as millions of us try to get home for Christmas to see friends, family, well, the AA's issued an amber warning for motorists taking to the road tomorrow and on Christmas Eve. They say expect significant delays across the country.
And if you're considering getting the train home instead or need to catch a plane, oh dear, you'll be facing the ever-present strike action.
Well, let's find out more. Our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody has been investigating what this means for us making journeys home in the coming days.
Before we tuck into this, we've got this. When it comes to travelling home for Christmas, we're on the road to nowhere. Planes, trains and automobiles grounded, cancelled, snarled up. Travel broadcaster Simon Calder says he's never seen anything like it.
I've been covering disruption at Christmas for longer than I can remember, but frankly, I've never quite seen it as confused and stressful as this.
The RAC is saying there will be 20 million car journeys between now and Christmas, nearly half of those on the 23rd and the 24th. For many, it's a case of jam today, jam tomorrow. And it's pricey too. Petrol is around 153 pence a litre, with diesel at 176, significantly higher than last year. The RAC says we're being heartlessly overcharged. Better to get the train instead? You'll be lucky.
If you're on the roads or the railways, the advice is travel as early as you possibly can. Things will be getting very busy on Friday on the roads as well as Christmas Eve. And frankly, if you don't get where you need to be by Friday night on the trains, well, it could be too late. Some lines have no trains at all on Christmas Eve, and on others they will be shutting down very early indeed.
That's because of another strike by the RMT, this time from 6 p.m. on Christmas Eve. And it's not much better in the skies either.
In the skies, well, it's too early to tell what the effect will be of the UK Border Force strike, which is going to affect passport control at Heathrow, Gatwick, Manchester, Cardiff, Birmingham and Glasgow from Friday morning onwards. The airlines, the airports and the authorities seem pretty confident it won't have too much of an effect.
The experts are pumping out the usual public announcements. Check your car before you travel, leave plenty of time, wrap up warm, and expect the unexpected. When we finally get home to loved ones, enjoy the festive break, they say, because there's more strikes and travel chaos in the new year. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Well, we can speak to Jeff now, who's joining us from the North Devon Link Road in Somerset. Jeff, very good morning to you. Has the chaos started?
It's not too bad here, but I have to say, I always know that Christmas doesn't arrive for me until I've stood on a cold, wet, dark bridge overlooking a motorway talking about the Christmas getaway. As we were hearing, I mean, it is quite calm here on the North Devon Link Road at the moment. I'm just outside Barnstable in North Devon, but it is going to get worse. As we were hearing, because of that RMT strike that kicks in at 6 p.m. on Christmas Day, people are they're saying, whatever you do, try and get where you want to be by midday, by lunchtime on Christmas Eve. All very well, unless you have to work on Christmas Eve, in which case that's a bit more difficult. But just in the same way that the NHS have been saying yesterday, whatever you do, don't do anything that might land you up in hospital, the RAC is saying, whatever you do, don't do anything that means you're going to break down. They're advising people to be really careful, to check their cars over, to check the tyres and the brakes. They say that most of the accidents that happen on main roads happen, or most of the breakdowns rather, can be avoided if you only just check your cars before. So we've been given lots of good sage advice to try and make sure that we don't break down on the motorway, because 20 million of us will be travelling between now and Christmas Day on the roads.
Jeff, thank you very much, speaking to us there, overlooking a motorway. Well, Christmas really has started for you then, Jeff, in Somerset. Andrew, you've got some fairly complicated Christmas travel plans.
Yeah.
Feeling daunted?
Yes, yes. My heart sinks, actually. I mean, the point of a strike is to strike when it's going to be most effective, and Christmas holidays is a time when we've got baggage handlers are threatening to go on strike, the passport team going on strike, the army's being deployed. It's all very depressing.
And the trains, yes.
And the trains, of course.
Well, hopefully that's given you a bit of advice about how, when and where to travel. Of course, for many people, it's too late and those plans already are in place. We've got more on the travel to come, but right now it is 8:15. Let's bring you up to date with the other stories making headlines today.
Well, now it's national highway workers in London and the South East who are beginning industrial action today. Strikes are going to continue until Christmas Day. Their union, the Public and Commercial Services Union, has acknowledged the walkouts are likely to inconvenience travellers. Well, that's the point of it, isn't it? But they blame the government for offering what they say is a below-inflation pay offer.
Cabinet Office Minister Oliver Dowden has agreed that Matt Hancock broke government rules by appearing on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here without first getting permission from Parliament's anti-corruption watchdog. A spokesperson for Mr Hancock maintains he did follow the rules and said the watchdog had got itself in a total muddle.
He was probably worried he wouldn't be able to go if he asked for permission. Now, the England forward Beth Mead, she's the BBC Sports Personality of the Year. She's the 27-year-old who won the Golden Boot and the player of the tournament at this year's Euros, which she and her fellow Lionesses went on to win. Other nominees were England Test cricket captain Ben Stokes and the 7-times world snooker champion Ronnie O'Sullivan.
Now we're getting the very first details about King Charles's first Trooping of the Colour parade in honour of his birthday on June the 17th. Well, the details have been released by the Palace. The senior roles in the parade have been confirmed, with the Queen Consort stepping into Prince Andrew's
post as Colonel of the Grenadier Guards. And Prince William, who's now, of course, the Prince of Wales, is taking the baton from his dad at the Welsh Guard.
Well, let's get the details from our royal reporter, Cameron Walker, who's in the studio with us. Here we go, some positive news, a real celebration to come. What do we know?
Yes, a royal reshuffle it is for the household divisions. Trooping the colour, of course, his birthday parade, going to be on the 17th of June next year. I think what's most significant is the changes in the Colonel. So, as you said, the Queen Consort Camilla is taking over as Colonel of the Grenadier Guards, a role previously held by Prince Andrew. He was stripped of that role back in January following his out-of-court settlement with Virginia Giuffre, and he totally denies the allegations in that civil sexual assault case. Kate is taking over as Colonel of the Irish Guards, a role previously held by Prince William. But, of course, Prince William is now the Prince of Wales. So he is taking over as Colonel of the Welsh Guards from his father, who is now King, of course, and Colonel-in-Chief of all of them.
These military titles matter a lot to the royals, don't they? Because we know how unhappy Prince Harry was to be stripped of his, and Prince Andrew, who's effectively been banished from public life, also.
Yes, exactly. Prince Harry, I'm sure, if he was still a working member of the royal family, would have been up for one of these new roles. The other regiments are going to be staying the same. Of course, Prince Philip was Colonel of the Grenadier Guards up until 2017, a role he held for over 40 years before Prince Andrew took over that particular role. But, of course, it's British pomp and ceremony, isn't it, on the world stage? 260 years trooping the colour has been going, and clearly it's set to continue under the reign of King Charles. The eyes of the world will be on that, but, of course, it's only going to be a few weeks after the coronation of King Charles III.
Which we were told was the most important part of the Cabinet's last meeting of the year, was the coronation.
Yes, it is indeed, and we've heard some details of what we can expect from a coronation. We understand that the King is very much aware of the cost of living crisis, but I understand that he's very much determined to keep the British spectacle of the show, as it were, of the coronation. He doesn't want to cut costs and any of the ceremonial stuff. We do understand that the service will be a lot shorter than that of Queen Elizabeth II back in 1953, and any bits which are stripped out...
Well, that was about 4 hours, wasn't it?
Yeah, three hours, I think it was, but it's going to be a lot shorter than that. Any bits which are being stripped out are going to be seen as outdated, so we're still going to see the anointing, the crowning, the orb and sceptre, and all of that.
Can I just ask very quickly? Yes. Of course, we'll have the King's speech this Sunday for Christmas Day. That's going to feel very different, a tradition for so many families to sit down and watch that. What kind of tone do you think he's going to strike?
I think it's very much going to be a reflection on the life and service of his mother, the late Queen Elizabeth II. We understand perhaps he's going to be doing it in his own way. There's going to be a bit of a modern twist, although Buckingham Palace are keeping very tight lips as to exactly what is in that speech. He recorded it last week. I think it was Tuesday he recorded it. And then, of course, it's going to be broadcast on Christmas Day at 3 o'clock right here on GB News. And I'm going to be bringing you all the reaction immediately afterwards.
And then we understand there is a reference to Meghan and Harry.
Yes, yeah, presumably, as we saw following his speech, following his mother's death, he made a reference to Harry and Meghan, saying that he supports their decision to have a new life abroad. But, of course, this was before the Netflix documentary series, which the final 3 episodes airs last week. We understand that he recorded his speech for Christmas before the final 3 episodes aired, and presumably Buckingham Palace and His Majesty himself did not know what was in that series. So anything he does said is not with the knowledge of what was in that Netflix series, where they accused Buckingham Palace of colluding with the British press to make other members, more senior members of the royal family look good. And, of course, Buckingham Palace has made no comment on that point.
They always say these senior royals don't watch these documentaries. What's the truth? Do you think they do?
I think their courtiers do. I don't think they do themselves.
Cameron, thank you very much. I don't think we can go a day without mentioning of that pair. I know it makes people here bristle, and probably you at home as well.
Certainly makes me bristle.
Yes, I could feel it, you know. Really, I could. I thought we're going there.
Why are they running down their family? Why are they running down the institution? It's just not it's just not good.
I've encouraged it even more now,
have.
haven't I? Silly. 22 minutes past 8 now. Don't go anywhere. After the break, we're going to be finding out how we can look after our gut health during the festive period. Really, Dr. Michael Mosley is with us after the break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back, 25 minutes past 8. Lots to come on the programme here. In about 20 minutes, we're going to be speaking to a landlord who's been cooking Christmas dinner for homeless people since the 1990s. This could potentially be his final year. He thinks he's served up 1,000 Christmas dinners. That'll be really special.
I hope he's been given an honour, an OBE or an MB, because that's exactly the sort of act that should be rewarded. Yeah. Now, what should you do if you find a hedgehog in your garden over Christmas? We're going to find out at 9:15.
When was the last time you actually found a hedgehog in your
I haven't ever found a hedgehog in my garden,
but
I have 2 cats. We would probably see off the hedgehog,
Oh,
or would
no,
the hedgehog
no,
see
no.
off the cats? Not
Okay.
sure. My cats are killers. They've brought in squirrels dead.
That's
treat
horrible.
for Daddy.
Oh,
Not
my
a treat that I like
goodness.
particularly.
Right, well, we can get into that in about an hour's time,
Yeah.
if you want to join us then. In the meantime, we have been talking about what it is that would take to stop the strike action and much more, particularly Christmas travel plans as well. GB Views at gbnews.uk if you want to join in the conversation.
Well, wander around the supermarket and you can see it for yourselves. The shelves are filled with party food as we gear up for our Christmas lunch, Christmas dinner. The festive season, it's now in full swing.
Now, while certain Christmas staples are a must during this period, they might not, and this is obvious, isn't it, seem the healthiest choice.
Well, joining us now to tell us how we can protect our gut health this festive season is the author of the brand new Times bestseller, Just One Thing, and the Science Centre. It is, of course, the great man himself, Dr. Michael Mosley. Good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
We're good. So tell me, are you having a healthy Christmas lunch, Dr. Mosley?
I'm going to have a mixed lunch. I think, like most people, I'm going to aim for some healthy ingredients and some pretty unhealthy ingredients as well. One of the things you can do, in terms of gut health, it's about looking after your microbiome. There are around 100 trillion microbes living in your gut. Some of them are good for your health, some not so. And what you want to do is try and feed the good ones, if you like, and starve the bad ones. And unfortunately, a lot of the things which we love at Christmas, which include sugary things like that, they feed the bad ones, and that causes inflammation, gut pain, and obviously weight gain. What you should aim at, for example, is eating nuts instead of crisps if you can. The nuts are full of really good fibre, which feeds the good ones. And another tip I have is to make sure you're getting plenty of veg with your main meal, along with the turkey, getting the greens because they're full of fibre. And one other useful tip is when you do your potatoes, cook them the night before. This is convenient as well. Cook them with the skin on, obviously. You don't need to bother peeling potatoes these days. When they're cooked, put them in the fridge. Take them out, and then you roast them with olive oil or whatever fat you want. But the process of actually cooking, cooling, and then reheating potatoes changes the nature of them, so they become what's called a resistant starch. And
Michael,
that feeds
just
the bacteria.
listening to that, I'm thinking the to-do list on Christmas Day is so long. How many people do you think are going to say, oh, Christmas Eve, quick, we've got to boil the potatoes before tomorrow?
Well, it's convenient, but you've got to do them sometime, haven't you? I mean, the great news is you don't have to peel them. I remember as a kid peeling potatoes, and that was an utter and total waste of time because almost all the nutrition is actually in the skin. So I think it's a useful thing to do. There are some things you need to prep the day before, and I think potatoes is one of those things. As I said, just kind of cut them up, cook them, put them in the fridge, and then they're just ready to slap in the oven on top of the hot oil.
But look, I like my roast potatoes to be really crisp, and I'm a great fan of Delia Smith and goose fat. They won't be very crisp if we leave the skin on.
Oh, I don't know. I've tried them every sort of way you can. Give it a go this year. See what you think. As I said, honestly, it saves you a huge amount of time. All the good stuff is in the skin. That's where the fibre is. That's where all the vitamins are. When you're eating just the peeled potato, then what you're really doing is just getting the starch. Plus, you're obviously getting a lot more bang for your buck because you're not wasting all that lovely skin. The other thing as well is in terms of alcohol, if you can drink red wine instead of white wine, then the red wine contains more of the substances like polyphenols, which seem to be good for your gut. So, a bit of red wine I have with my meals these days.
To what extent, I know this is all about looking after your gut health, do we just say it's one day, indulge, maybe try and repair some of the damage in January?
Yes. No, I'm a great fan, obviously, because I've written quite a few diet books, like the Fast 800. So I'm a great fan of revitalising yourself in January and giving it a go. And there's part of me which absolutely sympathises with what you said. But there's another part of me which thinks, well, you might as well. I mean, a lot of these things are actually enjoyable. They're not horrible. I did a feature in the part of the Just One Thing book. I wrote about the benefits of dark chocolate. And you grow to love dark chocolate after a while. Initially, it's not as attractive to you as milky chocolate, but the dark stuff has a lot of really healthy stuff in it. And as I said, have a go at the potatoes. Really do have a go. With the skin on, chuck them in the hot fat. It really does crisp up and it does work. And it saves you so much time. Brussels sprouts. Are either of you a fan of Brussels sprouts?
That's what I was going to ask you about, Brussels sprouts. Now, they're a staple of Christmas, so you're going to have them on your plate. And can I ask you a very personal question? Do they cause flatulence or don't they?
They do, not in everyone. It depends on the gut bacteria you've really got down there. But yeah, Brussels sprouts, it's about the only time of the year I eat them. My wife loves them, I hate them. Claire is a cookery writer, so she's a big fan of the sulfur you get in Brussels sprouts, which is very good for you. Unfortunately, it does cause flatulence. The all-time winner in terms of good for you but causing flatulence is probably Jerusalem artichokes, also known as fartichokes for a very obvious reason.
Dr. Michael Mosley, thank you very much for your time
and happy
your
Christmas.
tips. And happy Christmas. I have to say, those tips about potatoes, of course, real disquiet behind the scenes here at GB News. The producers...
There's an uprising.
There is an uprising. No. Would you try it?
No.
I have to say, I don't really think it's going to save time.
Look, my roast potatoes are my signature dish, and I peel them, boil them, boil them, and they go into scalding hot goose fat. They're done in an hour, and they're really crisp. They're fabulous. I'm sorry if the skin nutrients from the skin's not there. It's not about nutrient. I just love the taste.
There we go. If you've got any tips, let us know. gbviews@gbnews.uk. After the break, we're going to be going through the papers once more with Scarlett Maguire and Freddie Gray. Don't go anywhere.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us. We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 25 to 9. Welcome back to Breakfast on GB News. Let's bring you up to date with today's front pages.
Well, the Express is leading on fears the sick are suffering from home after emergency calls plummeted during those ambulance strikes yesterday.
The Times says the health service faces an extremely tough festive period as demand rebounds after paramedic strikes yesterday.
It's the main take for the Telegraph, which focuses on NHS staff apparently are to be offered a fast-track pay deal to end the strikes, not this year, but next year. It also covers the hero's welcome for Ukrainian President Zelenskyy on his extraordinary trip to the White House.
The Daily Mail says this could be the costliest Christmas getaway on record, with diesel almost £15 more expensive than this time last year.
And finally, the Star says, where is he? Rishi Sunak. They claim he's missing in action while the country's on strike and the NHS crumbles.
Well, let's go inside the papers now. Joining us this morning is the Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and also the former Labour advisor, Scarlett Maguire. Delighted to have you both back on the programme. Let's start with this. You've got to be pretty bold to come on and review the papers on this programme. Turns out 95-year-old Scarletts are showing daily acts of defiance.
Oh, this is a wonderful story. Is that there's been some 95-year-olds in Newcastle are doing things just to show that they're not going to go down. So they're refusing to wear sort of the emergency calls. They're going out without their sticks. And what they say is it keeps them young and it keeps them going and it makes them much more resilient than just fitting in with what everybody thinks. I just think it's absolutely great. And I think it's a real lesson for all of us people who are slowly getting there. I'm still quite a long way from 95. That actually, that's what we've got to do. Is
age before duty, they're calling it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh, nice,
I mean, it's very nice. And it's a great story because actually the better you feel, the more you like. And so they go out walking and they aren't, oh, I'm so old, I can't do anything.
And they're going swimming?
Swimming, absolutely. They make sure they go out every day. And these probably are lucky people who are not in old people's homes because that's the beginning. I mean, I'm sure old people's homes are absolutely wonderful, but you lose your independence. Yeah. And it's about being the independent person that you were 30 years ago. I mean, I just think it's a fantastic story.
Yeah. I was quite struck by this statistic that 527,000 people are aged 90 or over, and that's up 23%. In a decade.
Well, and that is a factor, of course, in the problem in the NHS.
Yes.
And the social care, having no proper social care policy, the ageing population, which is going to continue to get older.
So we need lots more defiance.
Lots more defiance and lots more social care so that I mean, you know, you have one of these people, they get stuck in hospital and that's it. And they're the sort of people who need to go home and have proper care in the home and then they can go.
Yeah. Great story.
TV is going to be full of lots of people's agendas over the next few days. But over the last year, Freddie, Ofcom have revealed the programmes and the shows that got the most complaints. Which were they?
They're both programmes I don't watch. Love Island and I'm a Celebrity.
Why don't you watch Love Island, Freddie?
I haven't got anything against it. It's just never come up.
Yeah. So you don't know. I've never watched it.
I have maybe sort of watched.
Maybe you should be a contestant, Freddie. I'm just seeing a whole new.
Well, there would no doubt be lots of complaints about me.
Yeah.
Potentially there might.
Misogynistic comments.
So why are they complaining about it?
Misogynistic comments and bullying.
OK.
Which I can do a bit of both on live TV if you want.
Yeah.
So there's lots of complaints about that. And then the second most complained thing was Matt Hancock. But apparently the complaints were very evenly split between hatred and support.
Yes, because there were some people complaining that he was being bullied on the programme and other people complaining that he was even featured on it in the first place.
There's this silent, near majority of people who actually quite like Matt Hancock, and it's very strange.
Yeah. I was very sceptical when he went in. I was astonished he went in. If I'd been advising, I'd have said, don't do it. But he did very well in there. And I think he was helped. I don't know if you watched any of it, Scarlett. For once, I watched a couple of episodes because I wanted to vote for him to do a Bush Tucker trial. Yeah. He was helped by the fact he was relentlessly bullied by Boy George, who was quite, to be honest, unpleasant.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, I didn't watch it. I just read about it and saw clips. And I thought that the people who were with him were really stupid because actually Matt Hancock is really good at sort of fashioning the rope and hanging himself.
Yeah.
And the minute you get bullying, and actually we've seen on these reality shows, British people hate people being bullied, even if they're Matt Hancock. And you know, I absolutely agree with the people who thought he should never have gone on in the first place. I mean, I think it was totally shocking. But once he was there, let him do it.
Do you think maybe, the editors set themselves a challenge? Can we make the public like Matt Hancock? And they pretty much succeeded.
Well, I think they did.
Because you can edit.
He came third.
Yeah. I think part of the problem, I did watch quite a lot of it, was that the people who were angry with him couldn't quite nail down exactly what it was they were angry about. Was it that he broke the rules or the guidance that he set? Was it that they couldn't see their loved ones over lockdown? Was it lockdown in itself? So it was quite a muddled picture of discontent.
And also, you know, he can say, which is true and right and fair enough, to say how difficult it was. You know, it was a very difficult time for me, and people like hearing that. You know, people are generous-hearted, unlike me.
I still wonder if he's going to regret, when we get the public inquiry into COVID, his claim in his diaries that he didn't cause COVID in nursing homes, care homes. Remember, he told us he'd put a protective arm around our care homes.
Yeah.
It was the care workers bringing in COVID into the care homes. And when I read that, I thought, whoa, that's going to backfire.
Well, I mean, the problem with his so-called diaries is they were written in retrospect. I mean, the real thing about a diary is you want to read what the person thought at that moment. But to say this is what really happened now that I've thought about it.
Yeah, because he brought in a journalist to write them for him, didn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's move on, if we can, to the Education Secretary from the former Health Secretary, who's defended her right, it's in the Mail, page 5, Scarlett, to wear a rather expensive watch.
I know. I mean, so the Education Secretary, we've got teachers about to go out on strike because they're so angry about how low their pay is. So what she says is a lot of teachers in a lot of regions are in the top 10%. I mean, this is slightly weird. And then she's wearing a £10,000 Rolex, which, you know, the optics are terrible. I mean, whoever advised her should have said, just take it off. And now she says that people who complain about it are inverted snobs.
That lacks authenticity, though, doesn't it, to just take it off for the speech? Surely it's better to just own it if she's wearing it.
Well, I mean, I think you have a choice of what you do, but I think to go out and tell people that they earn too much money and wearing your £10,000 watch is just a bad thing. I mean, there is nothing authentic about most cabinet ministers, right? So either, you know, Rishi, actually, who we know, you know, is one of the richest people in Britain.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, he accidentally shows off his wealth because he doesn't understand what it's like not
wearing
to
his
wear
Prada shoes on a building.
Yes, absolutely. But he does make an effort not to do it, right? Just a bit. And when he first became Chancellor, and you know, and we heard about his Star Wars things, I mean, he was very good at doing that. And you know, if I was advising her, I'd just say, be ordinary.
Perhaps it's my working class upbringing. I would have said to Gillian Keegan, the minister, save that Rolex watch for best when you go to an important, a big dinner or go to somewhere smart. Don't wear it to work.
Well, she says it's a present from her husband, and she wears it with pride because it means a lot to her. So I can't get that angry about it. I just don't understand watches is my main thing.
It's to tell the time. It's to tell the time, Chris.
But who uses a watch to tell the time anymore? I notice you've got a watch. And you both do it?
Yeah.
How much?
This is a cheap watch.
I have a real confession, though. Mine's actually been broken for about 6 months. It's actually more
it's just
like
for
an
show.
accessory. Yeah, it's just for show.
Yeah,
This did not cost £10,000, I think less than 50.
I think it'll be interesting to see. It's got a ridiculous name, the watch. It's the Rolex. What's it? Just. Let's look it up. Sorry, should have read the piece properly. It's called the Rolex Lady Datejust 31 Everose. I think we should come back to this and see if sales picked up over Christmas.
Oh, wow. Gosh.
Because she said how much it meant to her that her husband gave it to her. I bet there's a few husbands with...
It's for ladies, the watch, is it? Are they
Lady
allowed
Just.
to still say that?
Lady Datejust.
Maids are allowed to say that
31.
these days. All that woke nonsense we have to put up with.
I think Rolex doesn't do woke.
Good.
Andrew.
Let's talk, if we can. It's on the front page of some of the papers, The Times, but lots of people are talking about this, Scarlett. Netflix.
Oh, yeah.
If you share your password, you really could be in trouble.
She's looking guilty.
I know.
She's looking guilty. Call the police.
Well, because what? So my son is ill. We cannot share the same room at the moment because he's got. I mean, he's grown up. He's not 6 or anything, but he's got this infection. He's worried about giving it to me. So of course he said, "Mum, what's the Netflix password so that I can do it?" So that he gets it on his laptop.
But I guess that's one household with one Netflix account.
He doesn't normally live with me.
Oh right,
It's a real problem for Netflix, actually.
Yeah.
Because even, you don't have to be Gillian Keegan to have a house with multiple devices. And therefore you need to be able to access on multiple devices. So the only way they can stop it is by reducing the number of devices you can use. And that's a problem for Netflix. And if people get locked out of their accounts, they just give up. And they've already had huge subscription cancellations this year.
Yeah.
So it's a real problem.
They're doing all right. They're doing all right. They can afford to pay Harry and Meghan 100 million for some boring old...
Well, exactly.
Yeah,
and they have the crown. But actually, this isn't actually Netflix. It's the organisation in charge of it.
It's copyright law.
Absolutely. Which and the whole thing. I think it's one of those things that they didn't quite think through because actually everybody does it.
Yeah, and it was on their website. The IPO, the organisation, they've taken it down, but they still say we are though breaking the law. You're breaking the law, Scarlett, these days, by sharing the password.
People doing it with their Spectator subscription are breaking really out of line.
Do they do that?
I hope not.
Freddie, let's very briefly mention, if we can, lots of people driving home for Christmas. What are your travel plans like? Have they been hampered by strikes in some capacity?
No, not yet. We're planning to go to the Isle of Wight before the New Year, after Christmas, and the ferries are often a complete nightmare anyway. But fingers crossed that'll be all right. Yes, the story is driving home for Xmas. It's a petrol rip-off. This is more inflation. It's a real problem, and it's happening everywhere. And the strange thing about it is that Brent crude commodity prices have been collapsing for months now, and it's just not reflecting.
It's 15p a litre, the RAC estimate, is the overcharge. 15p a litre, that's a lot.
A lot of companies are doing it, and they're doing it to address their own concerns about inflation and the concerns of their staff. I mean, it is a rip-off, but it's also they're ripping off because they think they've got to get the money in. I can't drive, though.
Oh.
Yes. Wow.
So it doesn't bother me.
Well, probably bothers your wife, who has to put...
She hates it, yeah.
What, would you learn?
I would, but I've just kept kicking it on and on and on.
So it's not that you've tried and you failed your test several times?
I tried on 9/11 and I thought it was a bad omen, and then I've never done it since.
Have you ever you've not even taken a test?
I did on 9/11.
And you failed that day,
so
and that
why
was
did you fail?
Multiple counts.
Oh, Freddie.
I'm pretty hopeless.
That's useless.
But yeah, I was saying, my son saw a family friend, the dad getting behind the wheel, and he said, "Daddies don't drive."
Oh, sweetheart. How nice is that?
No, it's just your daddy.
Oh.
Thank you both very much for coming in.
Have a lovely Christmas.
Right, and you.
Yeah, will do.
Scarlett and Freddie, it's been an absolute pleasure. Now it is 10 to 9. A really heartwarming story for you. A pub landlord has been hosting a free Christmas dinner for his local community over the last 30 years, welcoming everyone from the homeless, single households and lonely pensioners.
Colin Robinson, he's also known as Mad Pierre, to which he'll tell us why, I hope, will be serving up a free 6-course meal to anyone in need of some company on Christmas Day at his pub. It's the Chestnut Tree Inn in Worcester.
He joins us live now. A very good morning to you. How are preparations going then for Sunday?
Well, I put the second turkey in this morning, and there's 4 to go, and there's a large piece of beef. And then I've got to peel vegetables and everything
Well, we were
else.
hearing earlier, no need to peel your potatoes. So that could save you a job.
Oh, no. They've got to be peeled.
I think we agree on that.
Be peeled.
How did this happen? Because it's obviously mushroomed over the years.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I was an accountant for 20 years, so I know about cooking. Cooking the books normally, but it's changed.
Talk us through that very first time that you decided to put on this spread. What was the motivation behind it?
There was a lot of elderly people in Hereford is where I started in approximately 94. And I thought, let's do a community lunch for them. Oh dear. Yeah, there's some pictures coming up. They're amazing, aren't they? So I did it. And all the community got involved, and we raised funds for local charities and things, and we did the meal, and it was great fun.
Now, I think it was you estimated that nearly 1,000 people have been served up for Christmas. Just talk us through some of the people that you've had and shared that meal with.
Oh, loads of people, but a few come to mind. There was an old lady turned up, and she sat down on her own, and then an old man turned up, and he got no one to stay with. So all day he sat with her, and they went off together in a limousine, because I got a limousine to take them home. So that was really amazing. And then there was a chap from the local homeless shelter in a wheelchair, and it was about 3 or 4 miles away, and he got about 200 yards down the road. His wheelchair packed up, and his mate walked him to the pub.
Oh.
And he got here, and I said, well done for getting here. You know, I said, you better have a drink. You look exhausted. And I said, your mate don't look very well. The chap that was pushing, he said, yeah, he has got a bit of a problem. He's only got one leg. And I thought, I don't believe this. I really don't believe this. It's, just things like that over the Christmases. See, I've lost most of my family now. I've got a couple of brothers, but I don't see them at Christmas. But this is like an extended family.
It sounds exactly like that. Colin, thank you so much. Colin Robinson, landlord of the Chestnut Tree pub, serving Christmas dinner. 6 courses. Can you believe it?
He's a local hero, isn't he?
He is. Don't go anywhere. Lots more to come after the break. Again, what we can expect from the upshot of yesterday's strikes.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather forecast from the Met Office. Bit of a foggy start in places, staying fairly damp, misty and murky across the south today, whereas further north we should see some brighter skies. Low pressure is moving away from the north, hence why it'll be drier than yesterday. But further south we've got a whole host of weather fronts just gradually edging in, bringing outbreaks of rain and drizzle across a good part of England and Wales. Eastern areas starting dry, but it is, as I say, quite misty and murky, some fog around, especially on some higher routes. Brighter skies for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but northerly winds setting in, bringing more showers across the far north of Scotland, falling as snow at times across the Northern Isles. No chance of that further south. It'll be rain and drizzle because it is really mild here, 11, 12 degrees Celsius, but it is turning colder again across northern Britain with those winds starting to pick up once more, though generally the winds, certainly for northern England, Northern Ireland, are a lot lighter than yesterday. During this evening, I think we're not going to see a great deal of change. Those northerly winds still bringing some showers in across northern Scotland. It might turn a bit icy as temperatures fall away, but further south it stays murky, misty again, some fog in places and rain returning to the far southwest by the end of the night. Very mild here. Temperatures may stay in double figures, but colder conditions setting in further north. And that north-south split continues into Friday morning. This band of rain could be pretty heavy. A lot of people hitting the roads on Friday, so just bear that in mind. It's going to generate a lot of spray and surface water spreading from south to north, getting into northern England and Northern Ireland, southern Scotland by the end of the day. Further south, it should brighten up during Friday afternoon. Still pretty mild here as well, although it will at times be windy. And again, got that big contrast between north and south. Low single figures across the north, much milder conditions further south. The milder air wins out through the Christmas period for all areas, mostly looking fairly grey for Christmas, but then it could well turn colder and brighter during Christmas Day from the northwest.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
The NHS is bracing itself for a surge in demand after emergency calls plummeted during those ambulance strikes yesterday.
A very good morning. It's 9 o'clock on Thursday, the 22nd of December. This is Breakfast on GB News this morning with Andrew Pearce and me, Rosie Wright. Here is what is leading the news this morning.
The NHS, of course, it's facing a surge in patients from today after those 999 calls dropped by 25% during yesterday's ambulance walkout. Senior doctors fear the fall in demand could mean people are suffering at home.
The Royal College of Nursing, the union's going to schedule further strike action for January unless the government opens pay talks today. Now, that comes as nurses and midwives in Scotland reject a 7.5% pay offer.
Against all odds and doom and gloom scenarios, Ukraine didn't fall. Ukraine is alive and kicking.
That's the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy receiving a standing ovation after he addressed the United States Congress in Washington. It was, of course, his first foreign trip since the start of the war, and he also had talks with President Biden.
New analysis has revealed that drivers face their costliest Christmas getaway ever. The roads will see an anticipated 20 million trips over the holiday period, with the average price of petrol standing at £1.53 per litre.
Far too much. Get in touch the usual way, of course, via Twitter or email gbviews@gbnews.uk and let us know where you're watching or listening to us from.
So our top story, NHS leaders are warning that hospitals face an extremely tough festive period. They're anticipating there's going to be a surge in patients expected because there were far fewer yesterday during the ambulance strikes.
In fact, 999 calls dropped by 25% during the walkouts, which has prompted fears among some doctors that this could mean people are suffering at home.
Well, it comes as the deadline for government to open pay talks with the Royal College of Nurses approaches. The RCN says unless discussions start today, they'll schedule more strikes for January.
Well, let's get more from our reporter Ellie Costello. She's at St Thomas's Hospital in London. Ellie.
Yes, good morning to you both. It looks like a very busy day here outside St Thomas's Hospital in South London, and that's because there are going to be knock-on impacts of the disruption, the strike action in the past few days. There is concern, especially for people whose conditions have worsened in the past 48 hours, as nurses and ambulance workers have walked out in a strike over pay, and NHS providers have warned about a knock-on impact of people who have missed appointments in the past 48 hours as well. So they're expecting all of those people to descend on their hospitals, local hospitals today, or dial up for an ambulance. We could see a huge surge in demand today. The number of people phoning 999 on Wednesday was down 25% in some parts of England. Many people heeding advice to only call for an ambulance in case of severe emergency. But speaking this morning, the head of NHS providers, Saffron Quaternary, she says that hospitals are now braced for this surge in emergency treatment. She says it's a very difficult picture now across the NHS and social care, with extremely stressed situation in the NHS. She is calling again on the Health Minister, Steve Barclay, to enter into fresh pay talks today. Now, the Royal College of Nursing is asking for a pay increase of about 5% on top of inflation, which puts it around 19% increase in pay. Now, the government have offered pay increases of between 4 and 5%. So there is a huge difference between what is currently on the table. Steve Barclay so far has ruled out any new conversations, but the deadline is today for the Health Minister to come to the table again with the RCN and put a new offer on the table. But so far, it does still look like a stalemate.
So we'll be monitoring that as the day goes away. Ellie, thank you very much for keeping us up to date there. Let's get more analysis. Joining us now in the studio is the former Liberal Democrat and Home Office Minister, Norman Baker. Norman, a very good morning to you. So we've got this really ramped up rhetoric now between the health unions and the Health Secretary, both blaming each other. Who is to blame?
To some extent, both of them are, because there's a case for an increase above 4 or 5%. Nurses have lost 7.5% in real terms since 2010. They're trying to make that up. On the other hand, their demand at 19% is clearly unaffordable. The government, by refusing to talk about pay, is being belligerent and unnecessarily provocative, I think. So both sides need to compromise a bit in the interest of patients.
No sign of a compromise from either side?
No.
clearly the deadline today is going to pass. There will be no new talks on pay with Steve Barclay. So more strikes next month.
More strikes, and there's a possible danger, of course, that people can suffer, perhaps even die as a consequence of these strikes taking place, and we'll be in the unedifying position of one side blaming the other for deaths occurring. That's not where we want to be.
It's not a sustainable situation, but also politically, for the Conservatives to start a fight with the nurses. There was a recent poll that said 2/3 of the population support the nurses' strike. This is hard for Rishi Sunak to navigate.
Well, I mean, I think they're rather unwise. I mean, I think that they can pick a fight with the miners in the 1980s or the railway people today and maybe get away with that, but picking a fight with the nurses and ambulance drivers is not a good idea, because people ultimately want the health service to work properly for them, and they will blame the government if the government seem not to be moving.
We thought there'd been movement in the sense the Scottish government, health is devolved, the Scottish SNP government had offered 7.5%. We assumed it was going to be accepted because people at the lower end of the nursing pay scale will be given an 11% pay rise, Norman. Now, the union has rejected that. Now, that's a gift for the government.
Well, it's certainly...
Because that's a pretty good offer by anyone's standards.
It strengthens the case of the government in the sense to say that people are being unreasonable.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily move the dial as far as the public's concerned. We'll find out whether the public react to that or not. But the question really is what happens next. I mean, what are they going to go back with in Scotland now for an improved offer, or are they?
Let's move on if we can. Have a little look at some royal stories kicking around today, Norman. And we are getting more details, slowly drip-fed, about what the coronation is going to look like. And now, apparently, what the King wants, and no cutbacks.
No cutbacks, and I think this is a tin ear from King Charles, because we do have a cost of living crisis. We do have people who are finding it difficult to put food on the table, and here we are from King Charles saying he wants a, all singing, all dancing coronation, no cut price coronation, and this will be good for the country. Well, people may like the spectacle, but they may not like the cost.
But it is a great spectacle, and the Prime Minister in the last Cabinet meeting this year focused a lot of the discussion on the coronation, because he said it's a great way to showcase UK PLC, and we understand there's going to be more world leaders and dignitaries at the coronation than there were even at the Queen's funeral.
Well, there could well be more, and I'm not against world leaders coming across and the government milking the situation.
Well, it's soft power, isn't it?
It is soft power, but we don't need to have, all singing or dancing full cost. And I think there are ways of dealing with this which make it an event which bring world leaders across without the full bill being...
How do you cut the price?
Well, I mean, there's all the stuff around the edges which can be cut out. I don't think we need to have as many people there as might be there. The events that will surround the coronation before and after can be looked at. But I think it's just the idea that we end up spending whatever the royal family wants in their events and saying it must be exempt from any attempt to save money. I don't think that's right.
Let's look into the Times, if we can, briefly. And there's this accusation that the royal family are on a mission to rewrite history.
Yes,
Are they really?
Yes, I mean, look, the royal family's records are incredibly inaccessible. From researching my book, you can find nothing at all officially after 1952, when the Queen Elizabeth came to the throne. So all the records are at least 70, 75 years out of date. We now learn an historian who wanted to write about the younger brother of Edward VIII, who died in 1942 in an air crash, has not been able to access any documents. The Windsor archives are incredibly difficult to get into. Even as a Privy Councillor, I find it difficult to get in there. And then there's no index of what's available. You simply have to guess what files might be there and ask for something, and if something helpful turns up, it turns up. But as I say, nothing for the last 80 years is available. And that's so out of line with anything else. The royal family undertakes public duties, as do government ministers, as do councillors, others. They are subject to freedom of information. Why isn't the royal family subject in the same way for their public duties?
Yeah. The official biography of the Queen Mother, written by Willie Shawcross, must have had access to documents after 1952, because it was a romp through her entire life, which only in 2002.
Yes, it was, and one has to ask why it was that particular historian was chosen, and what documents were available to him, whether he asked for documents or whether they provided for him. But I can just tell you, if you go to the Windsor Royal Archives, you will not see an index, you will not see information which you can access about anything to do with the late departed Queen's reign. It's just not there, and that's wrong.
We have to move on very briefly, Norman. You wear so many different hats. As former Transport Minister, lots of people have tried to get home early because they're nervous about what's happening on the roads and the rails, and even in the airlines as well.
Yeah.
What's your advice?
It's a bad time to travel. You know, I'm due to go and see my sister-in-law after Christmas up in Shropshire, and I got a text this morning to say that the train's been cancelled at my boat.
Already?
And there's no alternative train available. What am I going to do? Am I going to drive up there like everybody else?
Yeah, coach.
And block the roads?
When I ask for your advice, it's like you're saying don't travel at all.
That would be sensible advice, I'm afraid, at the present time. I mean, it's absolute chaos. The country's transport system's going to pieces.
We like your Christmas jumper, by the way.
We do. There is something positive, starry, festive. That's exactly what we need this Christmas week. Norman, thank you so much.
Thank you. Happy Christmas to you.
Happy Christmas to you, Norman.
Let's get more, though, on the transport situation. Our southwest of England reporter, Jeff Moody, has been investigating what exactly the situation is for those making journeys home in the coming days.
Before we tuck into this, we've got this. When it comes to travelling home for Christmas, we're on the road to nowhere. Planes, trains and automobiles grounded, cancelled, snarled up. Travel broadcaster Simon Calder says he's never seen anything like it.
I've been covering disruption at Christmas for longer than I can remember, but frankly, I've never quite seen it as confused and stressful as this.
The RAC is saying there will be 20 million car journeys between now and Christmas, nearly half of those on the 23rd and the 24th. For many, it's a case of jam today, jam tomorrow. And it's pricey too. Petrol is around 153 pence a litre, with diesel at 176, significantly higher than last year. The RAC says we're being heartlessly overcharged. Better to get the train instead? You'll be lucky.
If you're on the roads or the railways, the advice is travel as early as you possibly can. Things will be getting very busy on Friday on the roads as well as Christmas Eve. And frankly, if you don't get where you need to be by Friday night on the trains, well, it could be too late. Some lines have no trains at all on Christmas Eve, and on others they will be shutting down very early indeed.
That's because of another strike by the RMT, this time from 6 p.m. on Christmas Eve. And it's not much better in the skies either.
In the skies, well, it's too early to tell what the effect will be of the UK Border Force strike, which is going to affect passport control at Heathrow, Gatwick, Manchester, Cardiff, Birmingham and Glasgow from Friday morning onwards. The airlines, the airports and the authorities seem pretty confident it won't have too much of an effect.
The experts are pumping out the usual public announcements. Check your car before you travel, leave plenty of time, wrap up warm, and expect the unexpected. When we finally get home to loved ones, enjoy the festive break, they say, because there's more strikes and travel chaos in the new year. Jeff Moody, GB News.
We've been hearing lots of advice to travel as early as possible if you can. Lots of people who work from home, of course, can make their trips much sooner. Let's find out if the chaos has really begun. Jeff joins us now from the North Devon Link Road. Jeff, so tell us, is it all smooth sailing to start with this morning?
Actually, it's not too bad to start with. The traffic has been slowly building, but it's really tomorrow and the next day that the traffic really starts to get busy. 20 million car journeys between now and Christmas. That's what they're saying. Most of those, at least half of those, on the 23rd and the 24th of December. That's, as you heard just then, that's because of the RMT strike on Christmas Eve from 6 p.m. So they're giving us some very helpful advice. Try and get wherever you're going this Christmas by lunchtime on Christmas Eve, because after that you're going to end up in difficulties and you could well find yourself stranded on a train platform for Christmas Day, which would be no good to anybody. It's expensive. We've been hearing how expensive. 157 pence in places for a litre of petrol, 175 pence for a litre of diesel. So it's the most expensive Christmas getaway as well. But hopefully we can all make it home in time, and there's plenty of advice out there. They're giving some very helpful advice, saying whatever you do when you set off, make sure that you check your cars, you check the brakes, you check the tyres, you check your windscreen cleaner, so that you're ready to travel, because they say that most breakdowns are avoidable. So the best thing to do is to really check your cars before you travel on the road. Well, the best thing really is not to go anywhere this Christmas.
No, don't say that. That's miserable. I'm lucky actually because my family in London and I live in London, so that's easy. Jeff, thank you very much for keeping us up to date. Hopefully not too many days in the rain standing over motorways telling us about traffic.
Yeah, now after the break, we're going to find out what to do if you find a hedgehog out and about in the garden.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
It's 20 minutes past 9. Welcome back to Breakfast on GB News. Now, we're putting the finishing touches on Christmas prep. But what about our friendly garden hedgehogs? They're getting ready for hibernation.
However, any hedgehog that's not reached 600 grams by autumn could need some assistance.
But with rural hedgehogs in sharp decline, how do we look after them if we find one in the garden? Well, we can speak to a vet now at Tiddywinkle's Wildlife Hospital, Steve Smith. A very good morning to you. Now, Steve, I have to confess, I've only ever seen a hedgehog once in my garden. That is a very sweet one. Can you introduce us, please?
Good morning, and thank you for having us on your show. So this little hedgehog here was brought to us with a leg injury. So had some twine caught around its back legs. We've treated that, and hopefully this one should be well on the way to recovery.
What do we do if we find a hedgehog in the garden, Steve? Should we feed it? Should it be in the garden? Has it got lost?
No, I mean, it's great if you find hedgehogs in your garden. So obviously they're nocturnal, so they should only really be out at night. And at the moment it's really cold. Unfortunately, hedgehogs are one of the three groups of animals in the UK that hibernate. So even though it's really cold out there, they should be fine and safe if they find somewhere to hibernate. And you should really only be concerned if you see them out during the day. If they're out wandering during the day, they're staggering, or they seem to be out sleeping outside during the day, then there's usually cause for concern, and we recommend you then bring that hedgehog to a wildlife centre.
And there were quite a lot of misconceptions about what hedgehogs can and can't eat.
Yes.
So tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't feed them milk. They're lactose intolerant, and also people like to put bread out for them, and you really shouldn't feed bread because it doesn't really contain any nutritional value for them. So what we recommend feeding, if you want to supplement the hedgehogs in your garden, is meaty dog or cat food, so the meaty wet food or the dry cat kibble, and you can sort of scatter feed that in the garden as well if you want to sort of help support your hedgehogs at this time of year that may be struggling a bit. With the weather changing, sometimes they come out of hibernation for a short while and they might need a bit of extra food just to help them keep their reserves so they can hibernate safely until the spring.
Tell us, Steve, why you like hedgehogs so much.
Oh, they're just these lovely, gregarious, excellent little creatures. There's nothing else like them. And, we see 2,500 of them every year here at Tiggerwinkles. So they're a big part of what we do here.
So you said if we find them in the garden, we should probably leave them be. What is sort of the most hedgehog-friendly garden?
Yeah, lots of things you can do to keep your garden friendly. So make sure there's places where a hedgehog can nest and hibernate. So log piles or dried leaves under your shed, for example. And then also make your garden accessible for the hedgehogs. So make sure you have some spaces in your fences. So normally the size of a CD, you can imagine a hedgehog like him to fit through a gap under your fence. And also just make sure if you have any water sources in this weather, you're breaking them so that they can drink. But also if you have ponds or anything like that, make sure there's ramps going in and out so they can get in and out of those fine, so they don't get caught in the water as well. So there's lots of things you can do to make it safe. And also some people put out feeding stations for them as well. And there's ways you can adapt those to sort of discourage other wildlife and other animals from getting to the food. So there's lots of things that you can do.
Who would come off worse, Steve? My cat or a hedgehog?
Well, they have pretty good defence mechanism. You can see they curl up in quite a nice ball. So unfortunately, if you've got an interested domestic animal, then I think they're going to have a fairly sore muzzle if they try and interfere with this little guy. So I think your cat, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I thought so. How old is that little one?
Oh, this one's probably earlier this year, so probably maybe 6 months old or so.
And going to release it into the wild at some point?
Yeah, it's pretty cold at the moment, and so we haven't been releasing at the moment just because of the weather, and this one's not quite at 600 grams. So what we'll do is we'll overwinter this hedgehog. He gets nice bed and board, nice and warm here, so
and
he'll
hopefully
have
it's well looked after. Steve, for time, we just have to leave it there. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme. That is it from Breakfast this morning. I'll be back tomorrow from 6 a.m. Coming up, though, it's Tom Harwood with the briefing.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin and this is your latest weather forecast from the Met Office. Bit of a foggy start in places, staying fairly damp, misty and murky across the south today, whereas further north we should see some brighter skies. Low pressure is moving away from the north, hence why it'll be drier than yesterday, but further south we've got a whole host of weather fronts just gradually edging in, bringing outbreaks of rain and drizzle across a good part of England and Wales. Eastern air is starting dry, but it is, as I say, quite misty and murky, some fog around, especially on some higher routes. Brighter skies for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but northerly winds setting in, bringing more showers across the far north of Scotland, falling as snow at times across the Northern Isles. No chance of that further south. It'll be rain and drizzle because it is really mild mild here, 11, 12 degrees Celsius, but it is turning colder again across northern Britain with those winds starting to pick up once more, though generally the winds, certainly for northern England, Northern Ireland, are a lot lighter than yesterday. During this evening, I think we're not going to see a great deal of change. Those northerly winds still bringing some showers in across northern Scotland. It might turn a bit icy as temperatures fall away, but further south it stays murky, misty again, some fog in places and rain returning to the far southwest by the end of the night. Very mild here. Temperatures may stay in double figures, but colder conditions setting in further north. And that north-south split continues into Friday morning. This band of rain could be pretty heavy. A lot of people hitting the roads on Friday, so just bear that in mind. It's going to generate a lot of spray and surface water spreading from south to north, getting into northern England and Northern Ireland, southern Scotland by the end of the day. Further south, it should brighten up during Friday afternoon. Still pretty mild here as well, although it will at times be windy. And again, got that big contrast between north and south. Low single figures across the north, much milder conditions further south. The milder air wins out through the Christmas period for all areas, mostly looking fairly grey for Christmas, but then it could well turn colder and brighter during Christmas Day from the northwest.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock,